looks like we're on. Well, I'm going to start. All right, good evening, and welcome to a very special Tri-Board meeting for April 8th, 2024. I am Eric Eldridge, Chair of the Select Board. The following meeting is being recorded and broadcast by Tyngsborough Media. The meeting is available through our local cable access channels on Comcast and Verizon Fios, and as a live stream on our website, www.tyngsboroughma.gov. A recording of this meeting will be available through the video on demand portion of our website. Open meeting laws require that any member of the audience who intends on recording either video or audio so declare that now. Seeing none. After instruction from the State Fire Marshal and the Tyngsborough Fire Chief, in the event of an emergency, there is an exit directly across from me at the rear of the room and one to my left. With that, I would let everyone who can stand, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have some folks here. Before I do the full introductions, I'll kick it over to the Finance Committee to open your meeting.
Okay, motion to open finance meeting? So moved. Okay, and second? Okay, finance meeting, we are now open.
Excellent. So we'll start with introductions. Why don't we start to my far right this time?
Scott Pazerski, Finance Committee.
Larry Clausen, Finance Committee.
Stan Casidlo, Finance Committee.
Ed Smith, Finance Committee.
Jacqueline Schnackers, Executive Assistant.
Catherine Foster, Assistant Town Manager.
Colin Loisel, Town Manager.
Katerina Kelabokis.
Good evening, Ron Cohen. Let you go now.
Good evening, Ron Schneider.
Ed Kennedy, State Senator.
Colin Gary, State Representative.
Hi, Mike Flanagan, Superintendent of Schools.
Anthony Tenorella, School Committee.
Good evening, Joe Messina, School Business Administrator.
Daniela Thanis, School Committee.
Excellent. Well, welcome, everybody. We have special guests. So for this, we're going to adjust the agenda just a little bit. We're going to move the town manager's report down. And so after we do the meeting minutes and citizens' time, we'll go right into the tri-board meeting with Senator Kennedy and Representative Gary. So with that, could I get a motion on meeting minutes?
I move that the Select Board approve the regular session meeting minutes for March 25th, 2024.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? That carries 4-0-0.
I move that the Select Board approve but not release the executive session minute meetings for March 25th, 2024.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Are we able to, because there was only 3 of us that were here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure that you folks have that.
I wasn't here, so I will abstain on this, but yes, we're still good.
And
I
wasn't here either.
Yeah, we'll have to table it then.
We'll table that one for our next meeting because
You
we
actually still vote on it. You don't have to be there.
Our executive session meeting minutes aren't videotaped, so they could not have gone back and looked to make sure it was accurate, unfortunately.
correct.
We
So
had that issue with.
yeah, so we'll
Okay.
let's table those for now.
Yep.
I should have checked that before. Okay, citizen business time. There is no one. Excellent. So let's move right to the tri-board meeting. So what we'll do here, do we want to, what I'd like to perhaps do is let you folks go first, give us an update on where things are. Then we can have the folks on the board perhaps ask some questions. Do we want to go individually?
Yeah, we'll go in individually, I think. Representative Gary and I met a couple of weeks ago in Drake-it, and she went first, so I'll go first.
Excellent.
Well, that was Drake, right?
That's only fair.
It is only fair.
Well, thank you for coming in, Senator.
I think both of us are here mostly to answer questions, but I will give you a little update on where we are. We're in the process. The House version of the budget should be out sometime in April, later on this month. The Senate version of the budget will come out in May. both those budgets will be voted on, then there'll be a conference committee that will decide the differences. I would say that for the past years, at least since I've been a senator, which is going back to 2019, there's been a good amount of money for earmarks for individual communities. This is a different year, and I think it's going to be a leaner year. For the first 2/3 of this fiscal year, revenues in every single category have been down, right across the board. March is the first month that where that's turned around, so month has been a lot more positive than the previous 8 months, and hopefully going forward, you know, that it will sustain that way, and we'll still have revenue projections that will be able to meet our revenue projections, which should be good for everybody. That's not to say that that means that there will be a lot of earmarks available. I'm not sure what will be available, and I know that in terms of the Chapter 70 money and the local aid that Tyngsborough's got, that it's a pretty small in both categories. I think the local aid, the Chapter 70 money has only gone up by about $35,000, whereas the local aid's gone up by maybe almost $50,000, not quite $50,000. But there've been several earmarks that I've been able to get for the town since I've been a senator. And then, of course, I was able to get, we were able to pass, the Senate was able to pass, and the House was able to pass legislation which allowed for the town to be reimbursed $4 million for costs for the school construction project. So I'll leave it at that and open it up for questions, but Representative Gary, go ahead.
Thank you, Senator. As the Senator said, we don't have as large a budget of excesses. You know, I have my notes from last year when I came here, and we were 6.3% above expectations, and now, as the Senator said, we've only had 1 month where it's been above. We've had extraordinary costs associated with the emergency shelter program, where it's already been $1 billion in the last year. The House budget will be coming out on Wednesday, and we'll have a meeting, a caucus, to talk about what's in it. I'm afraid that it's not going to be great news. I'll be honest with you. We have a meeting with the chairman of Ways and Means individually every year, and this year I didn't look for anything but local aid and Chapter 70. I said those are the priorities. That being said, I am going to be proposing some amendments for any earmarks that we might be able to get. And all of our amendments have to be in by Friday. So if through the town manager, you folks could give us a list of your needs, that will be helpful so that we can file those amendments. I'll be honest with you, I'm very concerned about the emergency shelter program. We have $8 billion left in our stabilization fund, and $1 billion of that, you know, is going to the emergency shelter. I know that times are tough on the local end, and, you know, I am actually going to be filing an amendment to put a hold on the emergency shelters at this point. The idea that we're going to continue to take these folks in is just going to get larger and larger and larger, and we've been seeing some of the information about the no-bid contracts and what kind of situations these people are being housed in and not even have kitchenettes or anything to make their food. To an extraordinary amount for catering and so forth and transportation. We can't keep up with that. And, you know, at this point in some of the communities, you know, I think we're going to have firefighters, police officers, and teachers who are going to need shelter if we continue this way. So I'm not really hopeful on it, but I'm going to file it anyway because I think we need to put a hold on this. We can't be the magnet state of all the migrants. We're not doing our own children a benefit if we continue to fund the migrants. And we're not mean, it's just we will be taking away from our old children if we have to continue this. The Chapter 90 was just passed in the House the other day, and it's about the same amount as it was last year. But for Tyngsborough, they've taken real action on applying for different grants, whether it's complete streets and all that, and that is funded in the Chapter 90 as separate. Complete streets, the municipal pavement program, small bridge program. So you can expect about the same amount, but I'm sure that our town manager and staff will be applying for a lot of those grants. I had a question for you folks about the bridge project in the center. Now, I'm understanding there might be an issue with the length of the bridge, or, and if there's an expected cost, you know, please let us know that, if that's an amendment that we can try to do. But any other ideas that you have, please let us know. I know that when times get tough, unfortunately, this governor just vetoed, well, she cut, 9C cut all of the earmarks that we had previously, so cut them in half. Unfortunately, that shouldn't be the first thing she cuts. So it's important that you expect that too, that we never know what the administration will do. We're on the shortened schedule this year because it's an election year. We finish the end of July. So hopefully there's not a lot more spending except for what we can get in the budget. And as the senator said, we will do, our budget comes out on Wednesday. Friday is our deadline for amendments, and then we take it up the last week in April. So by the end of April, we'll know what the House version is. I'm hoping that at least they would give us an extra per pupil increase. That would be helpful, I think. Anything would be helpful. But obviously, we're not happy with the numbers, and we will fight for all we can. If you have any questions, I will let you know that our legislation on the cannabis has not gone anywhere. I'm going to continue to fight for that because, again, they talk about the ability, and the governor put in her municipal empowerment plan different ways that communities could raise funds, but we're just pushing these funds away that we could be receiving on the cannabis, and that was all pretty much decided when the ballot question was done. So I think that's a logical way of doing it. So.
Totally agree. Before I open it up, Colin, did you want to mention anything on the bridge to answer Representative Gary's?
Yes. I'm not sure what the budget impact will be at this point. We're still navigating what was previously a challenging relationship with MassDOT. I think we've overcome that. But once we know for certain, I can let you know.
Okay, great.
So with that, I will open it up to the respective boards. Why don't we start with school first, and then we'll go to finance and then select board.
Sure. Thank you, if I may. So thank you, as always, for your incredible support. Senator Kennedy, you mentioned the MSBA additional funding, which came along. You know, at the time, we were anticipating additional $4.1 million when we stood before town meeting in October. We're pleased to announce it came in closer to $4.6 million from the MSBA. So thank you for that, and your advocacy were there. I just will say that, you know, one of the things that, and you've heard before, and you've both been very tremendous supporters of the public schools, but there were four specific pieces of legislation that were supported by the Superintendent Association this year. An act to fully fund or move funding from circuit breaker money from 75% to 90%, to do special ed transportation from 75% to 90%, and to lower the threshold for special education reimbursement. All of those three bills went to study. There is a bill, however, that is still out there that I would really encourage you to support and get behind, and that's Senate Bill 332, House Bill 571, an act relative to the long-term fiscal health and sustainability of special education. And the reason I bring that up is when I presented to the select board not too long ago, we looked at a 10-year analysis of our spending, and in 10 years, our cost for special education out-of-district tuitions has gone up by 101% in 10 years. Our Chapter 70 funding has gone up by 8.1%. Our cost for specialized transportation has gone up by 60%. So Chapter 70 cannot keep up. It is not keeping up. And that's a whole different conversation. But specific to the special ed component, something needs to be done on that level. We know that OSD came out unilaterally with a 14% increase last year. We know that some of these private schools are setting their own tuition rates, and it's the public school that's funding it. We know that public school dollars are paying for 24-hour care for some of our students that are in residential programs, though they're not being educated for 24 hours. It's crushing the funding for public schools. And I hear you say that potentially we're gonna start impacting our kids. I believe we already are. And you can't pick up the Lowell Sun without seeing a community going for an override, talking about the fiscal impact. Drake, North Middlesex, Westford, Groton Dunstable, Acton Boxborough, that's just in this area. And if something's not done about special education costs and/or Chapter 70, or preferably both, I don't know how this model is sustainable going forward. So I would please say, if you could please get behind and support, how do we overhaul the special education funding and the reimbursement for districts? Because right now, it's crippling what we can do. I think we're all kind of holding on to say, well, we've done a good job. We didn't go over the top with spending extra money and hiring positions with that. So we're okay in Tyngsborough, but it's gonna catch up. So something needs to happen. So I would appreciate any support you could provide there.
To follow up on the transportation.
Sure.
Do you know how many companies bid for those? One. That's something that I am discussing with the Inspector General, because he had done something, I think it was Boston Schools, and that it seems to be that there is a gentleman's agreement not to go after each other's business. And I know in Drake, they talked about some of the different other things that there haven't been, or the amounts on the bids have just gone up tremendously in 1 year, and it doesn't seem reasonable. So I will be following up on that too. But certainly, you know, the OSD naming it 14% is just crazy. We can't do that. So you have my support, and we'll see what we can do.
Appreciate it. And just for your notes, the regular transportation went up 35.3% in that 10-year span.
The bill that you're talking about, Superintendent Flanagan, that's a Senate bill. So I'm not able to speak to the bill this evening, but what I'll do is I'll find out about the bill and find out what the forecast is for it, you know, whether it be passed. I'll get to you this week.
Great. I think they both filed for extension till April 21st.
Yep.
So that would be
Okay.
great. Thank you. I
Yep.
really appreciate it.
And I think that, just following up on what Representative Gary said, for the past couple of years, what's really happening, not just with special ed or with Chapter 70 or with, even with local aid, is the rate of inflation is much greater than 2.5%. And so everybody's following behind, and that's why you're seeing everybody looking for overrides. And it's also why nobody wants to vote for the override too, right? So it makes it be tough. I've had a conversation with the chairman of Senate Ways and Means about the budget. He has conversations with each senator before they do the budget. And what I did suggest to him was that maybe, you know, a 1 or 2 year bump in local aid and Chapter 70 might be a good thing to do, especially since we're spending so much money on, I mean, it's almost $1 billion that we're spending on immigrant families in the Commonwealth this year, and close to $1 billion next year as well. So if we're going to do that, I think that certainly some consideration should be given to cities and towns, at least for a couple of years until the inflation rate goes down and gets closer to the 2.5%.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I'm all set, but I'll ask my members. Yep. Mr. Messina? Okay. We're all set. Thank you.
Thank you, Art. Open up to Finance Committee.
Any questions from anyone?
Yeah, I agree with Colleen, this $1 billion, and I said, you're gonna put an amendment forward? Mm-hmm. Now, how do we stop this? How do we get that amendment to go? Because if we have to cut the money for our kids, our schools, our earmarks to pay for, and then, like I said, it's gonna be a magnet state. Mass is already one of the highest states in the country to live in. So they're gonna cut everything for our kids, our schools, everybody. So this magnet, you got hotels in Boston that, okay, it's a $200 person limit in that hotel. There's 400 people in there. But if somebody at a local business did that, they'd shut them down. But they don't. They just keep throwing money at it, How can our representatives, senators, have this happen to our state and just say, oh, it's $1 billion, we'll just take it away from the taxpayers. We'll raise your taxes, take your earmarks away, and give it to somebody else, and just keep coming in. You don't mind helping people, but when you just throw money away for no reason at all, it's insanity. I mean, how do we get these people out of office if they're just gonna constantly tax us and throw our money out the window? It's not fair.
So we need you to reach out to family members who might live in another district and get them to call their legislator too, to sign on to that.
Yeah, but you're saying you're gonna have a member, you don't have any confidence it's gonna go. So are all the representatives the same way? They wanna keep throwing money out the window?
Well, there are members of the Republican Party who have sponsored amendments. One of them filed a bill, and it's still sitting in the Rules Committee. The leadership has held it up from even getting to the floor or getting to a committee. So I will be filing it in the budget. They may rule that is out of scope, but I don't think it is out of scope if it's costing us money. And you know, the other thing that you talk about, the housing and all that, we've read about the transportation they're giving them and the food and all that, but in reality, we're gonna have a point where you're gonna need English language learning, more programs for that. You're gonna, if they happen to live in here for a while, then, and they go to another shelter, then you're gonna have the Homeless Act that's gonna make you cover their health, their education and the transportation to school. So there are many different avenues that it's going to impact. And, you know, I think it's important, but we need to get other members of the House and Senate to support this.
It's just insane. So we just gotta vote Republican then.
Well, I'm not Republican, and I want to do it, so it's
Right,
just a
so-
matter of who will be willing to stand up for it.
Right, exactly.
And we're not mean, like you said, we're
No, it's not.
compassionate, but there's a
You don't
point
mind
where
helping
enough is
people.
enough, we can only handle so many.
Right, and it's becoming, like you just said, perfect. It's a magnet state. They're gonna see that they can come to Mass, and then we're gonna give them everything they need. You don't mind helping people, but when it comes to this, we can't afford it.
And we already had an affordable housing issue already before this. You know, we have the MBTA communities, we have the
Right.
40Bs, we have all of that, and they want to get a certain number of these families. And to be frank, it is pregnant women and families are the only ones who are in those emergency shelters. And they are legally there. Half of them are Massachusetts residents who were on the list already, and half of them are the migrants. So it's not that illegal immigrants are coming in. They all have to have the status that they've been gone through, not become citizens yet, but they've been approved by the federal government. And they are families. But there's a point where they're talking about how many hundreds of families they want to have in permanent housing by the end of the year. And I think, where is that going to be? We already have a housing issue, and how are we going to do that? And what American citizens aren't going to get it, that affordable housing,
Right.
because we've got to place all of these people. So it is a huge, huge issue. And unfortunately, the better Massachusetts handles it, by giving the programs and helping them get workforce training and the ability to do that, to be able to work, the more are going to come here. So it's important that we put a hold on it, on the numbers now, because we're allowing them to come and stay for 9 months in the shelter, and then an additional 3 months if they show they're actively seeking employment and doing whatever English training and so forth. But that's a lot of people. And what is it going to do to our hotels who are housing those now? We saw it back in the fall when there was the Army-Navy game, and all those vets who were coming to Massachusetts and booked rooms were all of a sudden turned away, and it was made into a shelter instead.
Well, the hotels love it because now they're full capacity, and they're probably charging, say, double what they would charge anybody else.
But it's going to hurt the tourism, which
Right,
is another
exactly.
impact.
So, yeah, so we're paying on both ends.
Yeah. So if you spread the word to family members who live in other districts that they need to get their legislators to support it, that would be helpful. It's a numbers game.
I don't think that there's anybody on, or at least not very many people on Beacon Hill, either in the House of Representatives or in the state Senate, that want to spend that kind of money. I mean, it's $1 billion of surplus being spent this year, close to $1 billion for next year, and there's no reason to think that there's not going to be people asking for money in the third year. But I think that we're stuck with the problem basically because Washington won't do anything about it. They
Right.
won't do anything with the funding, and they won't do anything about the border. And even when there was a bipartisan solution to the border, they just rejected it. So if they're going to do that and just do nothing at all, then we're stuck with the problem. I think that down the road, what I'm hopeful is that maybe when we get a different type of Congress, maybe in January, that we may have a situation where we might get reimbursed for all the money that we're spending. It isn't fair, the kind of money that we're spending, and not only that, but we're also providing certain special transportation and food and so forth for people that are not, that regular people aren't getting.
Right.
And it's not being afforded to them. When we took up the budget, the supplemental budget to pay for the immigrant families just a couple of weeks ago, I co-sponsored an amendment which would have had it be that the immigrant families would have been able to go to work right away. As soon as they moved in, they'd be able to get a job. There's jobs out there for people. They can be working. The amendment was withdrawn because Senate Council said it was illegal. We couldn't do it because of the federal government. But I think that's at least a sign of the type of frustration that exists on Beacon Hill about this issue. Nobody's happy about it, but for right now, there's no place else to go, and there's nowhere else to do it. And you could say, well, just don't spend any money at all. Well, that's fine, but all those people that are living in those hotels, they're gonna be out on the sidewalk. And then what are you gonna do? So that's not a viable solution going forward. So I think that, hopefully Washington will wake up pretty soon, because hopefully Washington will wake up pretty soon, and maybe we can get a reimbursement for the money that we've been spending. In Massachusetts, it's $1 billion, but in other parts of the country, it isn't just the states, it's cities that are spending millions and millions of dollars. California has spent $17 billion so far. And you've got Chicago, you've got New York, and a bunch of other major cities that are spending a lot of money on this issue. And it's mainly because Washington just refuses to take any action at all.
And what gets me is, that money should go into the homeless vets in the state. I mean, the homeless vets, they get the worst treatment like you could ever see. That's where the money should go. To me, that's where it should be going.
And the thing is, we're spending all that money, and it's not bricks and mortar to make houses.
Right.
It's frustrating, because we're just making temporary, or, taking out a hotel's rooms. We're not building anything that would be more housing, and we need more housing.
Anyone else?
Well said, Ed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Other questions?
Okay, I'll open it up to the select board. I'm gonna start with Mr. Schneider.
I just have sort of a macroeconomic question. So you've said that about 2/3 of the year we're under budget for revenue. Any idea why that is? I mean, we're hearing how strong the economy is. Businesses seem to be doing well. Why are revenues down?
I don't know. I'm not sure anybody is sure of why that's happened, but I think it's been disappointing that every single month, when the revenues come out, that they never meet what they should be for the month. And there are some months of the year where they should be higher than other months, but for the first 8 months, that is up until the end of February, it's never met the expectations of what was projected. And so, that was one of the reasons why they had to be those cuts for the earmarks that Representative Gary moved out, is that the budget was out of balance because the revenues weren't there. So, I think the reason I brought that up is hopefully the good news is that, given what happened in March, hopefully it's turned around now and we'll get better going forward.
Okay, thank you.
I can tell you why to me, the reason revenue's down, it's simple, interest rates. People aren't buying cars right now. The interest rate used to be 3 or 4% a car, now it's 7 or 8. Same with buying houses, interest rates. You lower the interest rates, people will spend. Right now, nobody's spending money. You see it in my trade, plumbing and heating. People aren't doing the repairs and furnaces and boilers like they were 2 years ago. They're doing what they need just to get it by. Interest rates are too high. I'm not gonna do this until interest rates drop.
The other thing I think is that we saw so much funding being poured into the economy during COVID, and now all of a sudden that money's not there. So people who are making in the medical field who are getting extra money whether it was stipends or overtime, all of that, all of a sudden that's cut back. And so they don't have the money that they used to have. And that being said, we did pass the $1 billion tax cut last year, but our revenue projection included that. We understood that that was it, but it's still, even though our revenues were cut by $1 billion in taxes, it's still below what we expect.
Just to clarify, when you say revenues are down, are you saying that they're down compared to what they were last year, or are you saying that they're down compared to what the forecast is?
The forecast.
And and what is the forecast as it relates to how things were last year?
I don't know if I
above or
have
below?
So basically, just the quick answer is the governor and the chairs of House and Senate Ways and Means meet, and they develop what they expect the revenue to be so that they can build a sensible budget that will be a balanced budget. The Commonwealth's required to have a balanced budget. And so what they do is they look at prior years, maybe increase it by 2.5% or whatever would be, reasonable. And that's how the projection is made. And then, but what I'm saying is that for each of those 8 months, the amount of money that came into the Commonwealth was less than what was projected.
Okay, and what was projected would have been at least 2.5% more than what happened during the same period in the prior year.
I mean, I'm picking out 2.5% because that seems like a reasonable increase. I don't know exactly that it was 2.5%, but I suspect it would be right around there.
According to the governor's budget brief, it does say that it was $40.2 billion, excluding the income tax, surtax, and that it was an increase of 2% over the adjusted prior year. So it is just a little bit over the prior year, but we don't know.
So in the interest of time?
Yes. First of all, thank you for keep fighting for the host impact fee for the marijuana. I know you two have both shown interest in helping us out with that, and it's appreciated. My question is, as I know Senator Kennedy and Representative Gary also were supportive of, we have we need to build a public safety building at some point here, and I know you were trying to do an initiative to do something similar as we do building of the school. So any update, any progress on that that you've seen?
Well, yeah, I can tell you this. What I did was I filed 2 bills.
Okay.
One of the bills was just for public safety, just police and fire buildings. The other bill was for all municipal buildings.
Okay.
The bill that was for all municipal buildings is going to study. So we'll have to try again next session. However, the other bill is still viable, and I'm still trying to push to get that done by the end of the session. I think there's a lot of interest in that bill, not just in my district, but also particularly in Western Mass, where there are smaller communities that really need that kind of help if they're going to build, police and fire stations for the 21st century.
Yeah, smaller communities definitely, even in Lowell, right? Now that you're building a new school and you need a new public safety building there also, or at least police station.
Lowell's looking for a new police station, and a lot of the firehouses in Lowell are 19th century firehouses. So.
And we're the same way, so appreciate it. Thank you very much for the update.
And my office will keep you updated on that legislation as we go forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Person Calabocas.
Yes, well, thank you both for being here today. I appreciate it. So I didn't have the opportunity to read up before the discussion today on the emergency shelter program. I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not familiar with it or the spending associated with it. I sincerely am not, but I do feel compelled, again, in the interest of time, I'll keep it short, but I do feel compelled just to comment on some of the rhetoric that we had back and forth. Again, I have to look into the bill, but being a proud first-generation American here, right? Some of the rhetoric of, our vets are treated this way, therefore we should also treat our migrants poorly or as better than our vets. It's not a competition between vets and migrants or anybody else, right? And I appreciate any work that we can do to, yes, stabilize the funding in the budget, but also take into account that these are real people who have gone through, traumatic things in their life, and we are very lucky to have grown up in this country, having the luxury and the leisures that we do. And I hope that, while examining this bill, we keep all of that in mind. And that would be my ask in the discussions moving forward. Again, I'm not familiar with the emergency shelter program, the funding, anything like that. Again, I agree, if we can get that down, if we can get spending down, fantastic. But migrant kids are kids just like our kids. And I think that it's important to remember that. And that's what I would say for today.
Absolutely. My grandmother and grandfather came from Ireland. They were first generation. They were sponsored by family members to come over, and they were responsible for making sure that they were housed and funded and so forth. And yes, from what I understand, majority of our migrants that are coming here are from Haiti, and obviously they're having terrible time there. But we also have senior citizens who are on waiting lists for housing. We have veterans. To be honest, they're now using the old Chelsea Veterans Home to put the migrants in, because we built the new home for the veterans in Chelsea, and we've got the new home out in Western Mass. And there's a great program up in Haverhill, Northeast Veterans, who are doing a great job at housing our veterans. So certainly it's not completely eliminated, but I think it's just, for the longest time, we had the best welfare program in the United States, and people would just flock here for it. So it's got to be, and yes, the Congress has not done what they need to do, and I think that's why the governor even declared a state of emergency back in August, I believe, hoping that it would make us eligible for federal funds under an emergency, and it hasn't. So there's a point where we have to say, when does the entire United States handle all of this, and we can't take on more of the burden than other folks. And there are great nonprofits who are helping with this. I can't say enough about that. But the funds they're only going to get larger and larger and larger, and we're going to see the point where it bankrupts our own budget. And that's not going to help anybody.
I understand, and I'm not saying that, right? But if we have a problem feeding and housing our veterans, then we should address that problem directly. What is the problem and the solution to feed and house our veterans? We can't say we have a problem for veterans, therefore we should, put some kind of blame or fault. We can't help our veterans because we're helping migrants. We can help migrants and we can help veterans, and I think if we're going to talk about those two, we should talk about them in silos. Again, I understand the budget request, and we should go through it, right? And again, I haven't seen the emergency shelter program. All honesty, I haven't seen it. I haven't gone through the budget. I haven't gone through, what that means, right? But they got to go somewhere, right? And the idea that they can go somewhere but not here constantly, if that's everybody's rhetoric, there's nowhere for them. And I just want to keep that in mind, and at the forefront of our discussion.
I think the original budget in prior years for emergency shelter was about $325 million. And as the senator said, it's up over $1 billion now. So, it's taking a large portion of our budget, and we can't allow it to grow more than that.
I think, first of all, the amount of families that are being sheltered, about 50% of them are from Massachusetts. They're not immigrant families. They're right from Massachusetts. And I think that in terms of the immigrant families, anybody that's read the news, that sees what's going on in Haiti and other places, but in particular Haiti, if you were in Haiti, you'd do anything you could to get out of there. And if you can come to Massachusetts, then that's good. I think that, in Lowell, which is also in my district, the Inn and Conference Center will house 250 families. I don't know if any of you have ever gone on vacation for a week and stayed in a hotel room with your kids for a week, but that's, after a week, you may be maxed out on the amount of time, never mind if you keep, gonna be there for a year or so. It's a lot. I don't think anybody's, certainly the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is not depriving immigrant families of anything, but it's getting to be so much money, not just in Massachusetts, but across the country, that the federal government really needs to step up, and they are not stepping up at all, and they should be called out for it. To me, the idea that we have a problem at the border that's gone on for years, and the Congress comes up with a bipartisan solution, and they reject the solution out of hand without even bringing it to the floor for a vote, is absolutely outrageous. And whether you're a Democrat or Republican or whatever you are, everybody should be outraged that it's like that, and that they wouldn't even take that up to at least solve the problem. But beyond that, for Massachusetts, it's not just the problem at the border, it's also the amount of money that this is costing. It's really beyond what a state or a city can afford. It's the federal government that needs to do it. It's kind of their problem. They should be doing something about it. But I do think that Massachusetts is doing a lot for immigrant families, and has been and probably will continue at least for the next couple of years. That said, I think that there are also people that read in the newspaper about all of the extra benefits that immigrant families get, and they realize that they don't get all those benefits themselves. And so there's some resentment about that, and that they're paying for it. And so that's part of the problem. That's a political problem, but it's also, it should be Washington's problem. It should not be Boston's problem, and it shouldn't be Lowell's problem or Tyngsborough's problem or anybody else. Washington should be stepping up, and they are not.
I agree, and I thank you very much for your statement, because I agree that there does have to be discussion surrounding this, right? And I appreciate the respectful manner in which we frame that discussion. I sincerely do.
Just to let you know that one of the locations that they're actually housing them at night, but sending them to another program during the day, is the Cambridge Family Court building, and I'm sure you've been there and seen.
Very familiar,
Seen what the condition of that is. I can't even imagine where they're housing the folks.
It's not good.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, the bathroom alone
Yes.
on the first floor, forget it. So they're just trying to find any place that they can, and it's not good for the migrants either. And if you watch, Cheryl Fandaka did a investigation this week and showed the food that they were getting in one of the hotels, and you couldn't even tell what kind of meat it was. There was pieces of bone there, and we're paying a lot of money for that. So something definitely needs to be done.
So, sorry to derail. I know that took a little bit longer.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Sure, if you're going to cover a new area.
I don't believe that not one penny of that $1 billion would have came to Tyngsborough for our Chapter 70 or Chapter 90 money. Wasn't going to happen. So, although it's a good conversation, it wasn't going to help Tyngsborough at all.
Unless it gets larger.
The formula of the Chapter 70 and the Chapter money needs to change. But we weren't going to see a dime of that $1 billion anyway.
If it gets any larger though, Mr. Tenorella, you may see cuts in all of Chapter 70 or all of local aid.
Agreed.
So it could negatively impact the community.
Yes.
Well, thank you all for the lively discussion. I didn't realize we were going to solve all the country's problems here in Tyngsborough, but there are, there's impact, right? There are things, there's trickle down. And I certainly appreciate, having experienced folks like yourself advocating for what's important. I think that, Dr. Flanagan outlined some tangible items that absolutely impact us tremendously. We've talked about some of the formulas in town and getting some of that aid, maybe correcting some of those things. One of the things, I guess probably, I know it's obvious there are bigger fish to fry, but there are some small wins that we might be able to get. I know that one of the things that our library director had sent you folks some information on House Bill 3239, which is around electronic books cost a lot more than actual books, and yet from a demand standpoint, they're much higher. And it's because of, Amazon and Google and some of the folks having monopolies, and it's impacting our libraries for basic things. So I would encourage you to look at those. I think that problem's a little bit smaller than what we're talking about with the migrant crisis. So, you know, I do think that we did want to find out where we were with status of House Bill 2052, which is the DPW. I think that's in the Senate third hearing?
The website still says that it's in the second reading. Obviously, our concern is that if it doesn't make it further before the legislative break, then we'd be looking at next year.
We've been tracking that, especially in anticipation of tonight's meeting. I was hoping to be able to show up tonight and say it passed today. That's with Senate Council. They're just giving it a final review. It's already passed in the House.
Perfect.
It should pass in the Senate pretty promptly. Actually, there's one person in the Senate Council that handles home rule petitions, and that person has been out on maternity leave for a while, and that's kind of the holdup. But we've been calling every day on that, and so that's the third thing. I'll let you know as soon as that's going, or else James will give you a report. But we're on top of that and just waiting for it waiting for the Senate Council to send it out. There's no problems with the bill, and you should not be worried that it will not pass this session.
Beautiful.
Thank you. And I did want to, you know, I'm glad Select Person Cohen had mentioned the Senate Bill 1537 around the MSBA-like program for public safety. I think it's a great idea. I'm glad that you're pushing for that. If there's anything that we can do to help, I don't know that there is, but other than give you our full support, because I think it's a great idea. Obviously, we like the MSBA for our schools, and thank you again for helping to get that additional funding, which, you know, was critical to the success of that project. The only other one, and it may be real small, but Representative Gary, House 485, you've had the vocation, the school, the fairness between traditional public schools and regional vocational schools.
Right.
I know it's been
You've
been on it for a while.
On and on. Yeah, that, it would basically say if the traditional public school can only increase their budget by 2%, then the vocational school, despite having a more cost per pupil, would keep the same percentage increase. Instead of the traditional schools being what's left over. Money goes to, you know, you're assessed the money for the charter schools, you're assessed the money for the vocational schools, and the traditional school gets what's left. So, yeah, unfortunately, it hasn't gone very far, but we're still trying.
Is there anything, because, I mean, my grandfather worked for many years in vocational school, and I'm a huge fan of vocational schools, but as you said very well, the challenge we have is that the traditional public schools get what's left, and that's not what we want. It's just an additional item that's in there, so if there's anything we can do to help support some of that, I know you've been an advocate for a while, and, you know, I'm glad that you were able to at least bring that up here as additional.
As well as the fact, I think it was Selectman Rowe who always talked about the fact that Tyngsborough has 4 high schools. That has the vocational, it has the Notre Dame, it has the charter, and it has the traditional. So the transportation issues associated with that and all, it makes it unique. And so we try to bring that up as well. There's not too many to fight that battle, unfortunately, but we'll continue.
Well, I know that what Dr. Flanagan had outlined, I think, is probably going to be far more important, but I do think it should be on the radar at some point. When we do get some of these critical items addressed, we can certainly address some of those others.
Because I did file a bill on the OSD percentage, because it was crazy.
So with that, are there any other items? Because I know you want to go through the presentation. I think there's a couple items in there that I think would be important.
Yes. Do you want me to just cover those 2 additional legislative items now?
If you could cover, I mean, in the interest of their time and making sure, I know there's some things that are in there, perhaps, I'll leave it up to you to perhaps, if you want to talk, if you want to stick around for the update on the school.
Cool.
I'll leave it up to you. But if you can take us through at least those critical items.
Yes. The only other two legislative items that I wanted to bring to your attention, one is that we'll be seeking town meeting approval to file a home rule petition for additional liquor licenses. It's actually not really additional ones. They'd be replacing 3 that expired. Those were ones that were granted to the 440 Middlesex Road Plaza, but they expired in the middle of the pandemic and there was delays with the developer. So we'll leverage, our intention is to leverage existing available unrestricted licenses and to essentially backfill them with this additional home rule petition. So it'll just be 3 restaurant
They
licenses.
weren't special legislation licenses, were
The
they?
ones that expired were,
Okay,
but because they're moving forward now with the development and they're expired, we'll just use our unrestricted ones and hopefully be able to backfill them with
Okay.
new unrestricted ones.
great.
And then the only other kind of unique one that we don't encounter very frequently has to do with Chapter 60 and a town's ability to foreclose on properties that are delinquent on taxes. We don't do it. We very much try to avoid doing it, but once every 10 years, there's an issue where the town would be neglectful and not doing it. The challenge that we're now finding is that a recent Supreme Court decision ruled that Massachusetts Chapter 60 regarding foreclosure was unconstitutional because municipalities were foreclosing on a property and not just taking back the amount of money that they were owed in taxes, they were taking back all of the money. And somebody successfully challenged that. So we have a pending case where now, of course, the argument is that it's unconstitutional, although the town is willing to and has said we would just take the amount we're owed at somewhere like $300,000 and the homeowner would keep the equity. However, at the same time, the Attorney General's office has ruled that that's unconstitutional because Chapter 60 doesn't provide a mechanism for the state to, or for the municipality to return the money. So we think that we have a legal workaround to it, but it would certainly be just a lot easier if the state was able to change Chapter 60 to simply allow for the surplus, if you will, of a foreclosure sale to be directly reimbursed to them.
We do have a bill on that.
I think there is a bill
Yeah.
under consideration.
Yeah, so, the Chapter 60, that's not a home rule bill that you want to do for this specific
No,
thing?
no.
It's just a policy?
My understanding is there is a bill making
Yeah.
its way somewhere on the
Yeah.
legislature, and we-
Okay. Yeah, I thought I co-sponsored that one, so I'll find out who it was that we co-sponsored it with and see what we can do.
okay,
You don't know who filed that bill?
I don't.
Okay.
I can find it and send
But
it.
it's in the House?
Yes, I believe it's in the House still.
And
Those are
maybe
the-
that's something we can, maybe we can get it on the housing bond bill, if it has to do with housing. And we always try to find some vehicle for it.
Yeah.
You can take that as an action item?
Yes.
Thank you. So, do you want to go through some of the key items? Because I know
Yeah.
that there are some items in there relative to budget and state aid and the trends, and might help to see.
And I will go relatively quickly through this because the select board has seen this twice now, finance committee has seen it one time, and it won't be much of a surprise to the school committee either, so, but stop me at any point if there are questions. Our revenue, this is what our revenue is next year. It includes state aid, obviously our levy limit, which is limited to 2.5% plus any new growth. And other available sources is exempt debt that we're paying on 2 projects that will fall off of the town system soon. This is just a demonstration of where the money comes from. Obviously, Tyngsborough is heavily reliant on property taxes from residents. This is just a very detailed breakdown. All of this is available for folks that wanted to look closer on the town manager page of the town website. And this Wednesday is the first of 3 budget office hours where residents can come and learn more about every aspect of the budget. When we look at what our revenue includes, obviously it's the 2.5% increase on the levy limit, also new growth. This year, we're looking at about $250,000 in new growth. In the past, we had kind of over budgeted on new growth, and then in the middle of the year, we had to play kind of a puzzle game to figure out where to make up the difference. I've listed just a couple examples. We're experiencing a very minimal amount of the Toll Brothers growth in fiscal '25, and we'll experience the full impact of it in fiscal '26, which will be relevant for a future slide. We've seen the affordable units constructed on Sherburne Ave, and then some minor projects that put that 250 number together. We've been doing really well on meals tax. Largely, I think that's because of Tavern in the Square opening, Epigram. Cannabis, we're forecasting a small boost when the new facility opens. The select board granted the second host community agreement to Yellow House. on Middlesex Road. The board, for the first time in 11 years, adjusted the building permit fees. So that will result in an increase in revenue there. And additionally, we'll experience a lot of the permit applications from Toll Brothers in fiscal '25. And then one area where revenue will take a bit of a hit is from indirect costs from the sewer department. They have an enterprise fund, and so every year we charge back indirect costs, payroll, accounting, shared services. It's based on a percentage of their budget. They always carry a higher budget than necessary in case they have to make unplanned capital improvements. And so at the end of the fiscal year, we do a balancing act. They spend less, we kind of owe them more. We hadn't corrected the budget in a while, so we're going to see a $93,000 decrease. It's a one-time decrease in fiscal '25. As both the representative and senator mentioned, we haven't seen the House or Senate budget, but Governor Healy's initial budget was filed in January. The state aid saw an $86,000 decrease over fiscal '24, but on the positive side, our assessment went down. So the cherry sheet shows you how much money you're getting, and then it's like, haha, but this is how much we're taking. And so that results in a positive, if you will. This is just for demonstration purposes. I won't beat this over the head because we talk about it every time that they're here. But you can see that since 2014, the amount of state aid that we received hasn't matched what our budget increase has gone. I know last year Matt had a pretty detailed presentation on how it didn't even match the increases on the state budget side. But where our budget is 38% roughly higher than it was in 2014, state aid has only kept up by about 11%. And so when the cost of paving roads, educating kids goes up, it's tougher to make ends meet. And this is just a visual presentation of that as well. An update on the town's stabilization position. I will note that these numbers are artificially lower because they don't reflect deposits that were slated to be made in fiscal '24, but weren't made because free cash wasn't certified. So later this evening, I'll present the town meeting warrant to the select board, and the deposits will look double, but it's because we'll be doing makeup payments for last year. Obviously, on both sides of the budget, we work very hard to get grants. I won't go through all of them, but one of the biggest ones that we're working with right now is a $2 million Mass Works grant, which sees a private-public development at the highway garage, a new shared driveway, improvements to the site, and it will facilitate a large warehouse project, which will have a very positive impact on our tax revenue as well. On the expenditure side, it's a pretty standard budget. Our instructions to department was level service. Here you can just see that the total fiscal '25 recommended budget is $47.6 million. It's about a 3.1% increase over the prior fiscal year. The next couple slides highlight items that were requested by departments that are not being funded: social media archiving software, 24/7 IT support for the police department, an incident response plan in IT, an additional cruiser lease, and a part-time position in the finance department. All of the IT-related items we've already submitted grant applications for. The state is putting out a lot of money in the area of cybersecurity, so we feel pretty confident that we'll be able to achieve all of those items using the state grants. On the 24/7 IT support, in a future slide, you'll see that I'm recommending turning a part-time IT support position into full-time, which will alleviate some of the challenges that we've seen beforehand. Additionally, we asked departments to provide separate memos asking us or highlighting positions that they foresee the need for in their department. The police department sought an additional patrol officer and a part-time records clerk, and the fire department sought a full-time fire inspector. The FY25 budget does not include any of those, but now that we know these are needs identified by a department, we can look ahead to the future to plan for them. What is being funded in fiscal '25 that wasn't included in the fiscal '24 budget? The fire department in fiscal '23 was granted about $20,000 at the time for part-time administrative support. They're one of our larger departments and they don't have administrative support, so it was granted in '23. My understanding is that as we were approaching town meeting last year, it needed to be cut from the budget to support balancing the budget. I'm recommending putting that back in this year. The town has made a commitment to increasing the general fund contribution to road maintenance. We were on a probably 3-year streak, I think, of increasing it by $50,000 every year. That was another item that was cut at the last minute from the fiscal '24 budget. So really in fiscal '25, we would be $100,000 higher than we are, but I'm recommending just $50,000 higher. The highway department will see their part-time administrative assistant turn into a full-time position. That's a $10,000 increase. And the $13,000 increase in the IT department is to support making their part-time specialist a full-time position. And we've crafted the position to help the media department as well. So the Media PEG Enterprise Fund will offset that by $10,000. We've talked about these in so many meetings, but big drivers in fiscal '25 is trash and recycling. Every single community is struggling with that. We've solicited quotes from multiple vendors. We just got final data today, and it looks like we are getting the best deal from Republic, but we'll formally check out that with the board at a future meeting. There were some budgeting issues in the fire department's budget, so it looks like there's a 102% increase in their holiday pay, but it's simply because for the last 2 years, we weren't budgeting it correctly, and then at the end of the year, we were asking Finance Committee to make a transfer from other places. So this is an increase, but it's not really an increase in how much money we're spending. The software costs have skyrocketed in quite a few places. The IT department's budget increased by 35% in that area. We did use that to consolidate the amount of software platforms that we have, so some departments are losing access to underutilized software platforms, and they're being merged into existing ones to help lower the cost. And then finally, the police department typically has 2 cruiser leases within their operating budget, and the fiscal '25 budget includes a third one. And then this was more for public presentation. This is how the town's money is spent. I want to note that education is the Tyngsborough Public Schools, but also the assessment that we get from Greater Lowell Technical High School. Those are combined. And then a breakdown of where our employees are. On every side of the budget, we run very lean operations. On the enterprise funds, the sewer department has increased their budget this year slightly to accommodate a match that was required for an $870,000 federal earmark that they received. The ambulance enterprise fund also saw an adjustment in the holiday pay that we talked about on the fire department side because they fund 2 of the firefighters. On a positive note, they closed fiscal '23 with $69,000 in retained earnings. And then the PEG Enterprise Fund has increased to accommodate the $10,000 additional staffing, and then also a $40,000 capital request to replace some of the cameras and the confidence monitors in this room. We already talked about the legislative priorities. Dr. Flanagan, do you want to do the high-level budget overview before I go into the borrowing discussion?
Sure.
So just so everyone's aware, back in October, we came before the taxpayers and the community to see if we could get authorization to borrow an additional $4.6 million because of cost escalation. At that point, we were hopeful we were going to get additional funding from the MSBA of $4.1 million. Happy to say $4.6 million came in. Thank you again for your advocacy there. Additionally, at that time, we had a mass save rebate projected at about $475,000. We received confirmation that's coming at $490,000. So when we stood before the community in October, we said that the tax impact of $54.5 million, as originally approved, would not go up. Pleased to say that right now, the tax impact to the community will be $54.1 million, or it's gone down by $400,000. Currently, the project is 93% committed, 32% expended. Additionally, we have $2.9 million left in contingency funds, which represents about 7% of the budget. If we go back to the very beginning, the goal was always to have 5% in contingency going forward. So we're in a real strong position right now. The project is coming along very well. It's on time. The anticipated finish date is 12 to 15 months from this month, and things are going on very well. Currently, the town has also received about $13 million in reimbursement from the state to date. So contingency is healthy, 93% committed as of today.
Thank you.
Now, you say committed, that means like that it's been, pricing is all set in stone?
Under contract.
Oh, that's awesome. Perfect. So it's only 7% left?
Correct.
What number do you think that is? I'm just curious. You know what I mean? It's like 5 million, 10 million?
It's a David Sandin question. I don't have that answer for you. I
Just
apologize.
curious, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I can get that answer for you.
That's great, though. That's good.
All right. Do you want me to do the next slides?
Yes,
Perfect.
please do.
All right, so I wanted to give an update on how we've been paying for the project. Obviously, we've talked about the MSBA reimbursements, which come back to the town. The town's approach to the project was to do short-term borrowing until we had to do the permanent ban. So we've done 2 short-term borrowings so far. In November of 2022, we did a $7 million borrowing, and we work with our borrowing advisor and Left Field and the MSBA to figure out what the spending schedule is so that we're borrowing exactly how much we need to keep the project moving and not over borrowing, especially since the interest rates weren't super favorable. In November of 2023, we did a $30 million borrowing. Because it was a short-term borrowing, absorbing another short-term borrowing, we rolled the interest payment and paid off the $7 million in that $30 million ban. That will mature in November of 2024, at which point it makes sense now for us to look at the long-term borrowing. This number, I have the original 54.4 number in there, but we'll obviously borrow only exactly as much as we need to. What I wanted to bring Tri-Board's attention to is that because we are now beyond being able to do another short-term borrowing and we're going into a long-term borrowing, we will have to address the interest from the essentially $37 million in November of 2024, which falls in fiscal 25. This is a debt exclusion project, so mechanically, that shows up as an assessment above the levy limit on residents' tax bills. And then the permanent repayment, the 30 years that we'd be repaying this 54.1, that will begin 1 year after we do the permanent borrowing, so in fiscal 2026. We've been able to do that by utilizing what they call a long coupon. And so typically you have interest due 6 months after you sign the borrowing. By doing a long coupon, we've been able to push the interest in the first principal payment to 1 year later, which our goal was to minimize the impact until fiscal 26. As all 3 of the boards are also aware, part of the project included a $1 million over the 30 years general fund contribution, which essentially we earmarked from the new growth of the Toll Brothers project. Earlier, we talked about how this year in fiscal 25, we're expecting to receive about $160,000 in new growth. The remaining $1 million, it'll go up a little bit because when we first promised this, the values were lower, will be seen in fiscal 26. That said, what I wanted to have this board discuss, these boards discuss or bring to the attention is that the real impact of the borrowing will be seen in fiscal 26, which is when our operating budget will account for that $1 million. But in all transparency, the first interest payment that residents will see in the form of an additional assessment on their tax bill will be in fiscal 25. I guess I can leave it there for discussion by the various boards, but we finalized the borrowing schedule last week, and I thought this was a prudent place for us to bring that up.
Yeah, well, now is a good time to do it because it's going to hit our fiscal 25 budget, so we have to figure out, people need to be aware of that. So I guess I will open, there was a lot that just happened there, so I'll open it up to some questions. There's a few different topics. I didn't know whether our guests had any questions first.
My only question is, you went through that pretty quickly.
Yes.
Colin. Would you be able to send that?
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Do you know what the average payment increase is going to be for the fiscal year 25 on a home?
I have not run those numbers. My rough estimate is that it would be about a third of what we projected the impact would be when we're in the full repayment.
Okay.
But I don't have the most updated numbers.
We'll definitely want to pull that to see what that's going to be. So I guess I'll open it up to finance first and questions on anything that has gone.
Well, I got a question. So on the revenue that you earmarked for Toll Brothers, the $1 million new growth, I know you're gonna put that towards the school payment. Now, with the properties, the price of those properties going higher, could you earmark more than the one to offset the burden on the taxpayer? 'Cause I know a lot of people ask me, they got their tax bills last week, right? And a lot of people say, oh my God, my tax went up, my tax went up, my taxes went up. That's for the new school, right? And now I guess it's not, so if they get whacked again next year, it's gonna be even a bigger hit on the residents. So what I'm asking is that $1 million we originally discussed, because the payment's gonna be roughly $2 million a year, if you're expecting more revenue from the Toll Brothers, like you just said, can we take that money from the Toll Brothers and raise that up to give a less of a burden on the taxpayers in the town of Tyngsborough?
To be clear, the payment will be 3 million a year, offset by that million, so the 2 million, yeah.
Yeah, that's right, the two. So,
That's a policy decision for the select board, really. I don't think it'll be much higher than 1.2 million. The other thing that I would just remind all of the boards is by committing 100% of that money in fiscal '26 to the debt, we're now limiting the new growth that could be used
Yeah, I
to
agree.
increase the budget beyond the 2.5%. So it's a policy decision. There's nothing prohibiting it. I think the commitment was that at least $1 million was going to be dedicated to the project.
Yeah, and I mean, we can certainly talk about it. I think that as it was, the 1 million, looking at it across the entire general fund, schools, everything, $1 million was aggressive.
I agree.
That was pushing the envelope. I think when you think of accounting and generally accepted accounting principles, we want to be conservative. I think entertaining that, going beyond the 1 million, because number one, we don't have, that money's not in yet.
They haven't
It's-
sold yet, right.
I mean, right now, we're thinking it's like 160,000, so
Right.
I think it would be very premature. If there was a situation where in the future, we had growth that far exceeded what we expected, and we wanted to either, pay stuff a little bit early or reduce the impact on residents, we could certainly discuss that. I think that now is probably not a great time to do that,
Well, I
given where,
agree.
given
Right,
where
right.
we are.
They haven't been built yet, and they haven't been taxed. I agree 100%. But something to think about.
Always.
Where you put the 7 million into the 30, is there any way of putting that 1 point whatever into the long-term debt? No?
No, I asked, sadly. That was
You can
my
only
first
kick that
question.
can down the road so many times.
I
before
told
they
them I
say-
wanted to pay nothing in fiscal '25, and that's what they came back with.
Other questions from finance? Anything from school committee? Anything from the select board? We've seen this multiple times, but.
Well,
go
the
ahead.
only, I'll just, as Ed said, we proposed the $1 million to lower the tax impact on the residents. And we did that, it was very aggressive, but we thought it was very important because we really wanted the school to go through. And we didn't want to have a huge tax increase on the residents, or even bigger than it would have been if we didn't put in the $1 million. Was discussed by Senator and Representative earlier, all the towns around us are doing overrides. We are not going for an override. We are in good financial shape, but this is an aggressive number. We review it, as Colin will tell you, and as Selectman Eldridge will tell you, constantly, to make sure that we're still on target. But we did it to reduce the tax impact to the residents. We still stand by that. We still feel very confident we can do that. And every year we will look back and see if there's anything more we can do to reduce the tax impact on the taxpayers.
Yeah, the only other thing that I would add is, so if I heard you correctly, we have our contingency's sitting at 2.9 million today. Yes. I would hope that we're at the point, we're at 93% of everything that has been, put out to bid. We've received the bids back and it's committed. We've got 7%, which is just under 6 million based on my calculations of 84 million and times 7%, just under 6 million. I'm hopeful that we are not going to be engineering anything back in. I'd love us to finish the project with an extra million or 2 million or 2.9 million that's available in our contingency that we don't spend, so that the taxpayers don't have to incur those costs, and Colin doesn't have to put that out to get financing on it. So, I think we need to see what's ultimately going to end up happening and what those final numbers are. I think we just have to figure out what we're going to do with that 1.2 million, because we need to deal with that in this year's budget and we can't wait until the project is done. And my take on it is we might want to have this as a topic for next week, because I think there's still, we just got this, so I think we're still trying to figure out, and it might be stuff that we, get some feedback from some others on to see what their thoughts are and how we address this 1.2 million. But, I'm hopeful that we're not going to spend all that 2.9 in contingency, and that we'll be in a position, the middle school committee has been very fiscally responsible, and I don't expect that to be changing, so, and I'm going to knock on wood and sit there and say we hope that those types of things there, but I think we need to see what that ultimately looks like as well. And then, in the meantime, we'll figure out what we're going to do with that 1.2 million and how we're going to deal with that. From the school, anything on the budget? Any questions? No questions? We're good? Did you get all your answers, Colin?
Could I just ask
Absolutely.
about the increases from one year to the other? Drake had mentioned that fire alarm systems and as well as the elevator inspections were something that increased dramatically. I don't know if you folks have seen that in your bids. If there's anything unusual, I'm gonna be talking to the Inspector General again about what's going up a tremendous amount. And they even had a situation when they went out 3 times and the people who bid in the first one increased their third bid by 200,000. So instead of lowering it. So if there's any unique services that you're not getting a lot of bids, or if it's extraordinary increase from one year to another, you could let us know.
Thanks.
Well, with that, if we don't have anything else, I guess we can wrap up the tri-board session. We didn't have anything else that you wanted to cover for tri-board, right? Nope. Good?
Good.
I will let you folks close your meeting, and then
Can I get a motion to close finance?
Second.
Motion second. Motion second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
We are closed.
Thank you, guys.
And
Appreciate your
you
time.
folks can stay as long as you want, but I know how fun these
It only gets
meetings
more
can be.
interesting.
Let me get my budget amendments ready.
It's been fun so far, but we're gonna have to call it a night.
We appreciate it.
And we appreciate you coming in.
We appreciate it. Thank
really.
you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thanks.
Thank you so much. All right, we'll let folks go through, and then if you want to, you can take it, your thunder now, and
Thank you so much. I love it.
all right, Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, sir. Pleased to share that we were formally awarded a $25,000 earmark from the legislature in the fiscal '24 budget for public safety electrical vehicle infrastructure. This was originally a $50,000 grant that was slashed in half as a part of the 9 C cuts that Senator Kennedy and Rep. Gary mentioned earlier. We do fortunately have a little bit of flexibility in how this money is spent, so I'll be sitting down with Chief Howe and Chief Russell to figure out what makes the most sense. Both have vehicle orders that were approved in fiscal '25. So it may be that we put that 25 toward either a fully electric or a hybrid electric vehicle in either department, whichever one makes sense. Alternatively, it could just be used to install a new electric vehicle charger. It doesn't make sense at the fire department. We're tearing up the police department and redoing that parking lot. So if the vehicle doesn't exist, it might not make the most sense, but we'll work with them to figure out the best way to spend that money. I'd like to welcome Siobhan Lafreniere to the town of Tyngsborough. She joins us as a regional public health specialist through the NEPHA, which is the regional health grant that Tyngsborough is the lead community on. She'll be focusing on ensuring that residents in all of the member communities have access to the various resources and support that promote public health. She started last Thursday. She will primarily be out of Tewksbury Town Hall, but as with the other grant-funded positions, they rotate between all of the communities. Conveniently enough, she'll also be able to supplement the existing social worker services that we provide to the Council on Aging. So this will be a very holistic position that kind of looks at connecting people in ways that we weren't able to before. Today, we were happy to host the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments Municipal CEO meeting here in the community room. It's a monthly meeting of area town managers to discuss regional challenges, brainstorm solutions, and collaborate on issues that we all face. We had a great conversation about communicating the importance of passing zoning for MBTA communities. All of them except for Pepperell are in the same situation that we're in. So it was a productive conversation. Colleen Gary kind of stole my thunder on the town center footbridge project, but kudos to her for reading this, obviously, beforehand. The boardwalk has been installed, but we're in a bit of a holding pattern on the bridge installation. The original design by Time Bond was unsuccessful because, despite substantial testing done by Time Bond beforehand, the contractor, when putting the helical piles in, hit too much rock and it wasn't feasible. So we sent Time Bond back to the drawing board. They came back with a second design. When our contractor provided the change order for it, it was not only outside of the budget scope, it was higher than we're allowed to do a change order for. So Jake and I have met with the contractor and Time Bond twice now. We got a revised change order this morning that's much closer to where we need the project to be. So we'll be having subsequent conversations later this week. And I believe we'll be able to bring it down to something that we can afford. But the biggest piece for us was ensuring that we had this done before Block Party, because as you all know, the bridge is sitting on a sidewalk that is largely trafficked during Block Party. So the new vendor that our contractor got a quote from has said they can do it in less time than the last one. So we're optimistic, but I know people have been looking at why that bridge is still sitting there. This is part of the problem. It's a unique site. It's very close to training walls that support the dam that MassDOT owns. Nothing with the state is easy. They've made it superbly challenging. So the uniqueness of it has made it difficult. On Thursday, we're hosting a kickoff meeting with the designers for the pre-engineered steel building that will serve as a new DPW and sewer building on the site of the existing highway garage. I think that the highway guys are more excited about this than anyone. You may have seen they've cleared quite a bit of the site where it's going to be located. I expect that the design will be very quick. I think in their proposed schedule, it aligns perfectly with what we were planning, which would be to have design completed at some point midsummer and us be able to go out to bid for construction late summer. An update on the purple lights in the town center. We are optimistic that it's coming to a resolution soon. I feel like tonight's meeting I'm just slamming on MassDOT, but
Go right ahead.
Middlesex Road is a state road. It falls under state jurisdiction. They have responsibility for paving, for road maintenance, for plowing, for sanding, and maintaining the traffic lights. You would think that that also means that they have jurisdiction over the streetlights. And 9 months ago, when we first brought the issue to their attention, they acknowledged that they were their lights and that they were replacing them. Subsequently, over the summer, they replaced the lights at the park and ride and stopped short of replacing the lights in the town center. We've gone back and forth, and kudos to Senator Kennedy's office. He's helped connect us to people at MassDOT that were helpful. Turns out MassDOT denies that they have any ownership of the lights. And so nobody was addressing it. The good news is it's a very cheap fix. It's less than a couple $100 to replace the issue that's making it purple. So I've asked our light vendor, Arden Engineering, to go ahead and make the replacements, and we'll just continue behind the scenes to fight MassDOT and hopefully get reimbursed from it. The frequency of complaints to our office has increased dramatically, so it wasn't worth continuing to fight this fight behind the scenes. The planning board opened their public hearing on Thursday for the proposed zoning amendments for town meeting. The hearings will continue on April 18th, and residents are reminded that the proposed language is available at tyngsborough.ma.gov under the planning board page. Our first budget office hours will take place this Wednesday at 6 p.m. here at Town Hall. These informal meetings will feature a high-level presentation of the budget and a question and answer session so that residents can learn more about the budget in a less formal environment. We have 2 additional ones scheduled, one a week from Wednesday, April 17th at 6 p.m., and then again on April 23rd at 5 p.m. We'll also be releasing the line item budget at some point this week, hopefully before Wednesday. We're in a bit of a holding pattern, to keep using that word, as we work to settle union contracts, but I expect to seek approval on one of the final ones this evening in executive session. Pre-town meeting will take place on April 30th here in the community room at 6 p.m. If you have not attended before, it's an informational meeting where we present the warrant articles, we talk about the impact and answer questions. These are not debate forums and no votes are taken, but it's a more comfortable environment for folks to ask their questions. Aside from MBTA communities, we'll go through the warrant later. There's not much super exciting on the warrant. To most people, to me, it's all very exciting. On that note, annual town meeting is on Tuesday, May 7th, 2024, at 7 p.m. at the elementary school. I'm excited to announce that the Council on Aging is offering free rides to the May town meeting for seniors and other residents with mobility issues or who are unable to drive for other reasons. No questions asked. Interested residents should contact the Council on Aging to get their name on the list. Because we have to plan to have a driver available, we're asking people to register before May 1st. And we'll pick you up before town meeting, drop you off. The only caveat is that the bus won't make multiple trips during the meeting, so if you take the bus, you will unfortunately have to stay to the end of the meeting before it drives you home.
We'll make it worth your while.
And then lastly, I'll just note that last week, Town Clerk Joanne Schiffers released the ballot for the May 21st annual town election. A copy of the ballot is available online at tyngsboroughma.gov. Polls are open on May 21st from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., and you can learn more about absentee voting and where you vote on the elections and voting page of the town website.
Excellent.
I think I've said enough.
All right, Kat, do you want to do yours before I open up to questions?
Only have a few items,
Thank
of
you.
course. The town has received nearly $56,000 in abatement payments to date from the statewide opioid settlement and will continue to receive funding for the next several years. We have formed an internal working group made up of police, fire, public health, and library staff. And staff have been working to identify ways to engage the community, to identify the need, especially from those directly affected by the epidemic. In addition, we are working with departments to provide a centralized depository of resources from books to regional mental and behavioral health resources, training, and supplies. And the working group is also trying to leverage existing state and regional mental health and behavioral health disorder programming and services, which is something the state is really encouraging. And then last thing, proposals were due for assessors consulting services for FY26 through FY28 on Wednesday, March 20th. We received one proposal. The town awarded the contract to Catalyst, formerly known as Patriot Properties, which is currently contracted for assessing service. We've contracted with assessing services till FY25.
Thank you. I will open it up to the board for questions. Mr. Schneider?
None.
No questions.
I don't have any questions, but again, a lot of stuff that's in there, a lot of good things that are happening. Relative to the budget presentation, you're doing 3 weeks of it.
Just love it so much.
What if nobody shows up? Are you playing it by ear on some of those?
I'm making myself available for those 3. All of them occurred during normal working hours.
Yep.
So I will be here, ready to present. And as always, if folks have questions and can't make those sessions, they can call our office and set up an appointment to come in.
Colin, are those meetings, are each of them standalone meetings, or is it the same material going to be covered each week, or are they different issues each week?
Excellent point. They are the same content
Good.
all
right,
3
so
weeks.
if somebody
Thank you
misses
for clarifying
week one,
that.
they don't have to worry about catching up in week 2.
Won't be a sequel.
Perfect.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And of course, can they see this on a podcast? This update on a podcast?
They can listen to this on a podcast. They can watch it on YouTube. They can catch it in the Neighbor to Neighbor. It's a condensed version of Neighbor to Neighbor. They'll see it first thing tomorrow morning on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the town website. And you can sign up for alerts. So whenever we post a new town manager's report, it'll go directly to your inbox.
Excellent.
Wow.
Excellent.
Options.
Fantastic. All right.
He's everywhere.
Yep. He's
An influencer.
an influencer. All right, so new business. Let's start with a Tour to Cure road race.
Jackie?
Certainly. Included in your packet this evening is an application request from Temu City and Tim Wilson of the American Diabetes Association regarding the Tour to Cure bicycle recreational fundraising event to be held on Sunday, August 18th, 2024. The starting location is at 10 McGuire Road in Lexington with a small segment going through Tyngsborough. The race is expected to begin at 7 a.m., again in Lexington, and back in Lexington at 4 p.m. The race is expected to have approximately 250 participants. There will be no stops in Tyngsborough. The route will be marked with small coroplast signs attached to utility poles or stakes, which will be removed after the final cyclist has passed. This event will include medical personnel, bicycle mechanics, and an amateur radio operators will be monitoring all emergency radio frequencies in order to redirect the route if necessary. The request has been reviewed by the highway, police, and fire departments, and there were no adverse comments. I will also note that the police department will be posting this information on their website the day before the event in order to remind residents, and they will have a police cruiser in the area during the race time.
Thank you. Questions from the board? If there's no questions, then I will entertain a motion.
I move that the select board approve the road race application as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? That carries 4-0-0. Update on Winslow School, partial demolition / exterior restoration / relocation.
Excellent. There's no action required by the board, but I want to give an update on this pretty large project. So as the board and the public may remember, in May of 2023, town meeting authorized $1.5 million for the following work at the Winslow School: the demolition of the additions to the school, the restoration of the exterior envelope of the original schoolhouse, the relocation of that original schoolhouse further up the site, kind of closer to Winslow Road, tilting the school to face the bridge more directly, and some component of regrading the site so that the school was at grade and you would just walk into the building. To accomplish this, in October, I awarded a contract to Socotec for the construction design and cost estimating portion of the work. At the same time, we employed K&A, which is a local engineering firm, to perform a site survey. To date, we've had 3 design meetings with Socotec, which, when I say design meetings, there's not much to discuss because town meeting said do this and that's what they're designing. It's more confirming the scope of the work. We've had 3 design meetings which have been the status updates, and I would just note this didn't involve any of the rehab or renovation on the interior, so their scope was pretty clear. 2 weeks ago, we received very initial cost estimates which were based on the design development phase. Those cost estimates for the building work alone came in at $1.2 million. These costs included items 1, 2, 3, and 4. It does not include, most importantly, the site work that would be required to accommodate the project. Additionally, the number assumed that we didn't hit ledge in the proposed new location because the intent was to keep the basement, and so we had to go even further than normal. As a part of the site work assessment, we had Miller Engineering, which does test borings on site, to perform those test borings in the location that was identified as the new spot for the school. We did a large area because obviously town meeting didn't give us a geographical coordinate, so we did kind of a large scope. And in all the areas, we hit refusal at 4 to 6 feet, which likely indicates that we're looking at ledge or other heavy rock that will not be easy to get through. While obviously you can remove the ledge or rock by blasting or doing other heavy digging, blasting is a concern given its proximity to the Littlefield Library, and removing the rock is also very costly, which will drive the site work costs up. The $1.2 million doesn't include the roughly $120,000 contract that we awarded to Socotec, which was for the design, the cost estimating, construction docs, and then construction management phase. Given all of this, we are projecting that the cost will exceed the $1.5 million authorized by town meeting. We'll plan to present a formal order of magnitude cost estimates at some point in May to this board. But at that time, if it continues in the direction that we're going, we would need some sort of direction either from this board or from any or town meeting on what to do next. There are obviously other options, but I think that the scope of the town meeting vote was pretty clear on what they wanted to see happen, and so for that reason, we have not veered off of that path. So there's no action tonight. I didn't want this to be a surprise in May. We'll have, in the next couple of weeks, firm cost estimates for the site work, because the other part of the challenge is moving it closer to the road and dropping the site where the Winslow School is. We can't move the Littlefield because of the deed restriction, and so now we're dealing with the same parcel being at different elevations and us having to kind of carve around that. So that really ramps up the site work. So in May, once we pass town meeting, we'll come back to the board with an order of magnitude costs, and then we'll be looking for direction on what to do next.
Okay, open that up for questions.
No, I think it's too early for questions. I mean, I appreciate the overview. I think until we get some better idea of where we're headed cost-wise, I really don't have any questions so far.
Agreed.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Thanks for the update. All right. Vote to declare intention to lay out the public way, Farmers Way.
Yes, the planning board has submitted a recommendation that town meeting consider the acceptance of Farmers Way as a public way in Tyngsborough. This road is part of the Heritage Hills subdivision. A copy of the street acceptance package, including the recommendation from the planning board and also from our town engineer that the road be accepted, was included in your package. It's the same package that we filed last week with the town clerk, which is required by law. This process is a three-step process, with the first being that you vote publicly to declare that you intend to lay out the way. You would then host a public hearing, which we've scheduled for April 22nd, where abutters notices have already gone out and residents can come and speak in opposition or against. And finally, if those two steps are affirmative, town meeting will be asked to grant their approval on May 7th. This is a very straightforward package. Everything is in order. The town engineer has confirmed that the road meets the conditions that we would require for a public way. And practically speaking, for residents at home, this simply means that what is now a private way, maintained by private developers, will now become a public way, which we will plow, sand, and eventually maintain.
Okay. Questions, comments?
No questions, Mr. Chair?
Just one quickie. So this is just the normal process that we go through. The planning board works with the developer to make sure they meet our specifications. And then we go through this process where we accept the road. Once we accept the road, we also receive Chapter 90 funds for every road mile that we put in. So this is just part of the normal process. When I first came on the board 7 years ago, we were accepting a lot of different roads. This is the first one we've seen in a while, but this is the process we went through at that time, and just going through the normal process is what the request is here. Thank you.
And relative to that, this has got the final coat and curbs, all. We're not accepting something like we might have had 20, 30 years ago that was a problem. So this has gone through everything. Okay. All right. With that, I'll entertain a motion.
Move that the select board declare their intentions to lay out the public way for Farmers Way, also known as Heritage Hills subdivision, as presented, and schedule a public hearing on the matter for April 22, 2024.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Carries 4-0-0. Oh, fun. Presentation of initial town meeting warrant articles.
Yes.
All right, Colin, take it away.
All right. I will note that you will see this again on the 22nd, which is when I will ask you to formally vote not only to place each article, but hopefully your recommendations ahead of town meeting as well. Starting off, we have a special town meeting, which the timing of it doesn't necessarily matter. The last time we had a special and an annual, we put the special at the front, so that's what I've done here, but we can certainly amend that. The only two items on the special are one free cash article, which is the fiscal 23 reimbursement to the school department for Medicaid. This would have been on the May 2023 annual town meeting warrant, so that it would have been effective for their fiscal 24 budget. However, free cash wasn't certified, and in order to make changes to the current fiscal year budget, you have to do it during special town meeting. And then the second article is giving the sewer department the retained earnings that they accounted for in their fiscal 24 budget. Again, even though their earnings were never in question, the Department of Revenue didn't certify them because they didn't certify our free cash. So this exact dollar amount showed up in Article 11 of the May 2nd, 2023 warrant, which was their appropriations. And again, it's affecting this fiscal year, so it has to be on a special town meeting warrant.
Anybody have any questions? I think having it first is the right way to go. Anybody have any concerns about that?
I would agree.
And even if we don't vote on it, we can probably give you some guidance on
Absolutely.
ones that, as far as order of events and that type of thing.
Yes.
All right.
Moving on to the annual town meeting warrant. You can disregard the colors. That was just for me knowing which ones still need information. Article 1 is your standard reports of the town officers and committees. Article 2 is deposits to stabilization funds. $200,000 to the Capital Asset Stabilization Fund from certified free cash. This was an article that was originally on the fiscal '24 town meeting warrant. You're not seeing this one?
No, so you gotta, in the contents, it says appropriate Commonwealth transportation infrastructure.
Oh, I have not updated the table.
All right, so,
The Commonwealth Transportation is an article that we've seen on the warrant the last 2 years.
Yep.
However, the state has not, and perhaps because they've cut this as well, has not released any funding that we need to allocate yet. So if they do end up doing it, we'll have to do it at the October town meeting.
so we should ignore the contents.
Yes.
And go by what you have in the actual articles.
Yes.
Got it.
Thank you. So Article 2 is the deposit to stabilization funds, $200,000 to capital asset, which again was an intention from fiscal '24, and $10,000 to the stormwater stabilization fund.
One other item to note, in the contents, you talked about grouping the first 6 articles. We tried that. You're gonna work with the moderator.
Yes.
To see what path they recommend on that. I know that there are folks that want to go through every little detail, but at the end of the day, we're going to have a lot of articles, and people don't, one of the complaints that I've heard from a lot of people is that town meeting takes too darn long. And trying to group them was one way to address those types of things. But if you can work with, or if you want me to work with the moderator to address that type of thing, I know that we tried it, and there was a very small group of people who didn't want to go down that road.
Absolutely. Article 3 is authorized appropriations from stabilization funds for fiscal 2025. The first 2 are ones that have appeared on the warrant for the last 2 fiscal years, $800,000 from the road stabilization fund. Again, that's revenue generated from the 75% of excise tax that goes into the road stabilization from cannabis, and $30,000 from the stormwater stabilization fund. The special ed stabilization fund, I have in there $350,000. That is $100,000 that would have been spent this fiscal year that didn't get deposited because free cash wasn't certified. And I'm recommending for fiscal '25, $250,000. You'll see those deposits come in the free cash article a little bit below. And for folks that aren't familiar, the special ed stabilization fund, we talked about out-of-district placements today. They are fortunately early enough have an idea of what their out-of-district placements will be for the next fiscal year at this point, and the budget that they've presented relies pretty heavily on us being able to use the special ed stabilization fund to offset those costs. Article 4 is a recurring article every year. This authorizes the spending limit from the various revolving funds in town. The one area that I wanted to highlight here that will change slightly is that we project that fiscal '24, the public buildings rental revolving fund, which is what covers the old town hall and the first parish, will be self-sufficient in this current fiscal year. And so therefore, we've eliminated the $15,000 that used to appear in the general fund, and we're now shifting 100% of the expenses in the fiscal '25 budget to this revolving fund. So we're just working to confirm that $50,000 will be sufficient. That number may change before we ask you to vote on the 22nd.
And you have a highlight for road maintenance?
Yes, that one I've already confirmed.
Okay.
Article 5 is the standard authorization of the select board regarding contracts in excess of 3 years. Article 6 is the budget, which will have an attachment as we typically do with the budget breakdown. Article 7 is the compensation of elected officials. One thing I wanted to point out here is in putting together her budget request, I sat down with the town clerk, and given that the town clerk has 20-plus years of experience as a town clerk, we didn't think that it was prudent to fund that salary at the same level for the next fiscal year, since whoever takes over will likely be less seasoned. And so when looking at neighboring communities, the $69,208 number is a median number that reflects a modest increase of what the median number would have been this year. My recommended budget includes keeping all of the other elective town officer stipends at the same level that they were funded in fiscal year 2024.
Okay.
Moving right along to Article 8, which is the transfer of funds from free cash. Obviously, I've mentioned this before, but I want to note that this article looks heftier than normal because we're doing a lot of makeup payments in here. I will note that we submitted our free cash certification a week and a half ago. Typically, the Department of Revenue sends back a laundry list in the form of an Excel spreadsheet of questions. This year, they sent back only 3 questions. 2 of them were just about numbers that were transposed, and 1 of them we've since fixed. So I actually expect any day now to be able to tell the Select Board that free cash was certified. And we're looking at somewhere in the $2.5, $2.6 million in free cash being certified, and the total of free cash appropriations that show up on this town meeting warrant is just about 1.6 million. Running through the list quickly, the 105,000 is 2 years worth of our annual contribution to OPEB. The $200,000 to the capital account, that's the fiscal 2024 capital asset authorization for the roads project. That money is still needed by the engineering department. They've been able to leverage some of the existing funding to get them through, but we will need to make this payment. It was approved in the fiscal 24 capital plan. I've left on here the 60 grand to a capital account to fund the abatement and demolition of the former Council on Aging building located at 180 Lakeview Ave. We had a whole presentation at a previous town meeting, but that building suffered some pretty serious damage due to water. It's unusable, it can't be inhabited, and demolishing it will allow us to add additional parking and potentially more permanent bathroom structure at that site. I am carrying on with the capital asset stabilization. This $200,000, which you saw in the authorized the deposit of, is coming from free cash. Again, this showed up in the May 2023 annual town meeting warrant, and I've carried it over for obvious reasons.
Yeah, so we're adding 200 from what should have been last year, and then 200 what we're talking about, and that should bring us over $1 million, right?
Correct. Correct. $350,000, again, this accounts for $100,000 that was slated to be deposited to the Special Ed Stabilization Fund for this current fiscal year, and a new appropriation of $250,000. Obviously, Dr. Flanagan can speak more to this, but the out-of-district costs are killing the district, and this will allow them to maintain that 2.7% that we've budgeted for. I am looking to put $50,000 into the FinCom Reserve Fund. I know that the Capital Asset Committee has talked about there needing to be a source for us to have funds in case we hit an emergency in the middle of the year. This obviously wasn't funded in fiscal 24 because free cash wasn't certified, but based on the sense of urgency that I think the Capital Asset Management Committee placed on the need for that, and the fact that this mechanism already existed, the free cash will be $50,000 is my recommendation.
What happens to that money? So it was there before, then it wasn't, we pulled that because we said it wasn't really spent, and, Matt needed it to balance the budget, so we pulled that out of there. And then we said, okay, we're putting it back, but that's not like a stabilization account, so there's no money that's in there. If it doesn't get spent,
Rolls into free cash.
then it automatically rolls into free cash.
Correct.
Because of the type of, it's a reserve fund.
Yeah.
Got it.
Right, and Mr. Chair, just so that the residents know, this is a mechanism we had in place for like a decade. Last year was the first year that we didn't have it, so all we're doing is reinstituting this into the budget.
Yeah, and we looked at, one of the challenges in capital asset is if there are large assets that break, we didn't have good mechanisms to address that. And rather than creating another account, this reserve fund can act as that sort of thing. And it's not a large account, it's a reasonable account that finance can manage.
Yep, absolutely. I am recommending that we put $200,000 from free cash into the debt stabilization account. We'll see a future article that talks about better planning for the debt stabilization account. But I think as we go into the $1 million contribution for fiscal 26, it would be helpful to have started building up the debt stabilization account, which, as you saw in the budget presentation, is currently at 0.
Yeah, we need to, we probably needed to build into this a little while ago,
Yes.
but we need to we're gonna need it.
And then the last free cash article is $190,696. That's the fiscal '24 Medicaid reimbursement to the school department. So it's not double, it's that we didn't do it last year, and so now we're doing both. Questions on free cash? Cool. Article 9, you've seen this in the budget, but this is the appropriation for the ambulance enterprise fund.
The estimated surplus, that's being conservative
Yes.
relative to retained earnings that we're seeing?
Correct.
Okay.
We-
Because it was 60-something thousand last year. This year, we're targeting, what, 35?
Right.
And then what we're saying is conservatively, it'll be 28,690.
Exactly.
Okay.
Article 10 is the sewer enterprise fund. Again, the major increase is that they added more to their capital outlay account to include the match that was necessary for the $890,000 federal earmark. Article 11, oh, sorry.
And we're just going to make sure that they're right, justified, right, when we do the warrant article?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. It's terrible what's happening here. Article 11 is a transfer of funds from the PEG fund to cover the PEG Enterprise Fund's operating budget, totaling $185,279, which matches the articles that you've seen so far on their budget. Article 12 is appropriations from the Community Preservation Committee Fund. Lake Massapog Weed Control is a standard item, $3,500. We are including $350,000, as this board is aware, to potentially acquire a unit that's being foreclosed on. It appears like the bank has once again dropped the issue, so we're still chasing down information, but it will be good to have this money appropriated just to be safe. CPC did allocate $100,000 for a digital sign in the town center to replace the orange highway sign that has become a permanent fixture on the First Parish grounds. They saw a couple examples. It will be nothing flashy. It'll be a brick base with a sign in the middle where we won't have to limit our message to 6 characters and teach people Morse code in order to read it.
And it will follow our digital sign bylaw
Absolutely. It will comply entirely.
with nits and...
But of course.
Yes.
But of course. The only other item on here in terms of projects is the $7,000 that we allocate annually to the Lake Muscoppic weed treatment. We've kept the administrative expenses at $50,000. Again, any money you don't spend in that category rolls back to the fund balance. In fiscal '24, we haven't spent any of the administrative expenses, but we always just put the 5% allowance in. We have debt service for the First Parish. We're in year 4 out of that. It totals $235,625. And we're closing in on the Old Town Hall. We're in year 7, totaling $188,100. And as required by the CPC rules, we have 3 different deposits to the 3 different categories, totaling $300,000. Questions on CPC?
Any questions?
Fantastic. All right, we have a couple of prior year bills, as this board knows, and many people at home will remember. If you cannot pay a bill that was incurred in a previous fiscal year using the current fiscal year's budget unless town meeting gives you permission. So we have a $418 bill to the attorney that handles our tax title, and we have $741 to the University of Massachusetts Lowell Police Department, which is an invoice that a contractor did not pay on a roads project. So this is not a new appropriation. This will come out of the fiscal '24 appropriations. All right, getting into the exciting stuff. Article 14 is the acceptance of land with Clubhouse from Toll Brothers. This, of course, is the article that will authorize the select board to then record the deed for the open space parcel and the clubhouse that were donated to the town. The language comes directly from town council, so you don't have much room to wiggle with it there. One thing I want to note, given the increased conversations about the project, is that town meeting authorizes the select board to record the deed. However, the select board could wait to record that deed until any outstanding issues they have are satisfied. We did see a bond come through today from Toll Brothers, as was required by the agreement that this board entered into Toll Brothers with. They'll be required to address any drainage issues on the site. But if the select board wasn't comfortable, you have simply received town meeting permission to record the deed. We could wait to do that until we felt it was necessary. The one thing I will note is that it's not prudent for us to delay getting the town meeting approval. We have $800,000 from CPC on the line here for developing sport courts and other amenities on the site. and we have a rec department that is extremely eager to get into the clubhouse, so. And I've said this before, but nothing in Article 14 negates any of the regulatory authority that currently lies with either the planning board, the zoning board, or the conservation commission. This is simply saying that you as a select board have the authority to record the deed. Article 15 is the home rule petition that I told the legislators about. Essentially, our thought process here is that we granted one of the 4 licenses that was awarded for 440 Middlesex Road. The rest have expired. It is very likely that they'll be coming back for more liquor licenses at that parcel before this home rule petition process is complete. I mean, the DPW Act is a great example of how long these can take. So instead of asking for special legislation restricted to 440, we're saying we will likely have to use our unrestricted licenses at 440, so we would like to essentially reimburse ourselves with those 3. So the net number of liquor licenses in Tyngsborough won't change. It'll be as many as we would have had those 4 not expired already, or 3 technically.
Good.
Article 16 and Article 17 deal with the conversation that I had with this board when we first talked about the budget, which was planning for building up the debt stabilization and doing so by rethinking how we dedicate the cannabis excise. Currently, 75% of the excise goes into the road stabilization fund, and 25% is included in our general revenue estimates. As I mentioned, I'm proposing splitting that so that 50% of the cannabis will continue to go into the road stabilization, which we have confirmed will not result in a reduction in the projects that we have planned or that we could continue to do. And 25% of that annually will roll into the debt stabilization account, which will be very helpful if we find ourselves in a more difficult budget year and then having to meet the $1 million contribution. I will note that we are locked into this for 1 more fiscal year because the law requires that you do it for 3 years. I would like town meeting to consider it this year so that we have some certainty going into the next budget planning cycle of what we can count on. So these are town meeting votes. I think that it makes sense. It won't result in any reduction in what we've been doing with roads, but it will position us very well to start building up the debt stabilization, at the very least to help with the $1 million contribution that we're looking at.
Mr. Chair, I think one more advantage of this too is, when we go out to a long-term bond, they're gonna look at our fiscally how we're doing. And to be able to add this in and show that we just added this in at this time in preparation for this can only help. And hopefully we'll get a AAA rating at our bond rating now. We just have a AA+. And AAA is the highest. So this would help in that sense. And I think it will also help in hopefully reducing the interest rate on the long-term bond that we're about ready to do.
Yeah, I think it also, nothing precludes us if we want to put more into road maintenance.
Correct.
From other places, we can absolutely do that.
Which we
This
have
just gives us more flexibility.
Yes.
And that's one thing I meant to mention and I forgot is that we're now seeing the money from the fair share amendment. And so for instance, in fiscal '24, we saw $250,000 more than we planned. And all of that is restricted to roads.
And we will have a second marijuana facility that's up and operational. So a combination of those two, we don't expect the money that we're spending on the roads to decrease. We still expect it to increase, even with this.
Absolutely.
Correct.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments on those?
All right, Article 18, we've talked about earlier on a different agenda item, but this is the formal street acceptance for Farmers Way. And then you'll notice that I've left Articles 19 through 25 blank. Those are the zoning amendments that are still working their way through a public hearing. And what we found in the past is Eric has one version, he sends us it, we put it on our version, they make edits. To keep everything clear, we're directing folks to the town planner's website. That's the Bible, that's where all the accurate language is. When they close their hearing on the 18th, we'll spend the 19th, the following day, populating this with the final language so there's no confusion. Town council has reviewed all of the articles that I presented tonight. There were no changes, and he has been involved, obviously, from the beginning on the zoning amendments. And all of them, except for Article 25, the board has seen in the form of a presentation from Eric Salerno.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want, Mr. Chair, I can give a quick overview of Article 25.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is, based on what, because I was at the public hearing at the planning board, they may not send us, like, for example, 19 may not come to us, just because it was it was something where they want to redo the zoning for some parcels, and it was the first that the planning board was really seeing, and they haven't given enough time, so they might not have enough time to put it on this warrant. And then if you want to go through the citizens petition.
Article 25 is a citizen's petition submitted that, simply put, would change where a continuing care campus and assisted living facility is permitted. Currently, it's permitted in a B3. They're looking to make it also permitted in a B2. We don't give explanations on citizens petitions, but essentially they're looking to make the parcel of land directly across from Bryant's Lane on Kendall. That's in a B2. It's 50 acres or so. Not all of it is developable because there's a lot of wetlands. But their goal would be to be able to put a continuing care campus there. It was submitted by a citizen's petition. They presented it on Thursday to the planning board. I expect there'll be more conversations about it. It will have to appear on the warrant regardless, but that's what they're looking to do there.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And then the only question, my take on it is, we typically have the more controversial stuff going last. We don't have a lot of controversy except for the MBTA communities. And I think that one's probably best going last. What I would probably recommend is that Article 20, what is currently Article 25, the citizens petition, go before the other planning board or zoning amendments.
Okay.
Because that kind of gets everybody's mind thinking about zoning stuff. And then we
Absolutely.
finish up with the MBTA.
Works for me.
Everybody.
I think that's fine, yeah, makes sense.
And we will, we'll go through these with the final details and make recommendations for, presumably, for all of them, on the 22nd. Okay? Does anybody have anything else relative to the warrant?
No, I do not.
Lots of stuff.
Perfect.
Lots of housekeeping.
Yes.
All right. With that, I guess we're going to go to 6E, Zoning Board of Appeals requests for comments. Jackie, do you want to go through that?
Certainly. Included in your packet this evening is a request for comment from the Zoning Board of Appeals on a request for a variance and special permit to raise existing structures and build 2 single-family dwellings at 13 Norris Road by Mission Realty Development LLC. The Select Board typically makes no comments on these type of applications in order to allow the Zoning Board the ability to do their diligence, and we recommend the same this evening. The ZBA will hold a public meeting on this matter tomorrow on April 9th.
Anybody feel like they need to make comment? So make no comment?
No comment.
Did you want to give us a brief on the next one and
The second one
see
is-
whether that's any different?
Sure. The second one is a similar item on 18 Progress Ave. It's a request for comment from the Zoning Board of Appeals on a special permit for a proposed 14-foot by 48-foot billboard sign. Again, the board typically makes no comments on these, and the ZBA will also hold a public hearing on this matter tomorrow.
Anybody wish to make comment on this one in advance?
No comment.
No comment. All right, 6F, appointment, Conservation Commission Associate Member, Robert Wood.
Included in your packet this evening is a letter of interest from Robert Wood to serve as an associate member of the Conservation Commission. This opening has been advertised on the website for some time now. Mr. Wood attended the last Conservation Commission meeting and introduced himself to the commission and indicated his interest in serving. Mr. Wood is a long-term Department of Public Works employee. He has recently been employed by the Stormwater Superintendent in Chelmsford, and in this role, he frequently collaborates with the town's conservation agent. A copy of Mr. Wood's letter of interest, along with an email and support from the Conservation Director and the Conservation Commission, is attached.
Excellent. Any questions?
Sounds like a great addition.
Yeah,
A lot of
looks
great
like it.
experience.
Yep. With that, I will entertain a motion.
I move that the Select Board appoint Robert Wood as an associate member of the Conservation Commission effective immediately through June 30th, 2027.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Carries 400. 6G, authorize ARPA funding Bicentennial Field irrigation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the board will remember, we put the Bicentennial Field irrigation project out to bid last fall, and bids came back substantially over budget. At the time, the lowest bid was just under $750,000, despite the approved budget being $220,000. Understanding that this project has been a priority for the board, we asked the town's design consultant to revisit the project and try to value engineer out items that weren't necessary. We also incorporated feedback from the two vendors who submitted bids in an effort to get the project back within a budget we could afford. At the same time, we sought feedback both from the Select Board and the Capital Asset Management Committee on how much additional ARPA funding they'd be comfortable spending on the project, and both boards expressed a willingness to use unspent ARPA funds on top of the previously approved budget to get the total project budget up to about $500,000. I think there was a little flexibility on the capital asset side. We rebid this project in March, and bids were due on Wednesday, April 3rd. We received one bid, which came from Corbett Inc. That was one of the original vendors. They're very well-established and well-regarded irrigation contractor. We've checked all of their references and all have really good things to say about them. The bid came in at $523,581.90. The bid was in proper order. After reviewing the bid and receiving positive references for their work, I intend to award a contract to them for the project. The timeline proposed by the vendor has work being completed in September, with most of the delays being due to the time needed for the pump to be manufactured and shipped. In order to do so, I do need formal approval from this board to utilize ARPA funds for the project. While the original $220,000 was already approved, the remaining funds, in theory, had been kind of allocated but not formally approved. So in addition to using a balance of ARPA funds, we are going to utilize $40,000 from the operating budget to offset the additional costs. We had a very wet season this past year, and so we haven't utilized, I think we've utilized $9,000 from the $60,000 that we allocated for Bicentennial Field in the operating budget. We're leveraging up to $40,000. We probably won't spend all $40,000 of it, but it will allow us to have a healthy contingency for any unexpected costs. The additional ARPA funds come from unspent funds from the Town Hall roof project, the TES playground project, the Highway Department's sand shed, and unspent unallocated ARPA funds.
Open it up for questions, comments.
None.
Yeah, I mean, whenever, I think everything, I sit there, it's like, well, that's a lot of money. And, you know, unfortunately, that's what stuff costs. And I still think, you know, we talked about it in capital asset a few times. We wavered between the 500 and the 600 and sitting there saying, let's see if we can get it for 5. That's what we tried. I think you came up with a creative way to address that shortfall. So it's more money than I want to spend, but I think that was kind of like everything that I see in the budget. Like, wow, that's more money than I want to spend. But I think it is what it is. So I will entertain a motion.
I move that the select board authorize the use of $266,749 in ARPA funds to supplement the original ARPA authorization for the Bicentennial Field irrigation project.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? That carries 400. Old business. Goals.
Yes. All right.
Take us through them.
I hope you'll appreciate the color coding. Things that are in red are updates since you last saw these, and things that are green are things that we've identified as upcoming items, just so that they're on the board's radar. So the first one is to review an inventory of town-owned land and buildings, to determine a plan for future use. It lists a bunch of buildings that it should include and talks about, for any building that will remain, create a plan with a budget for properly maintaining the asset, including a timeline. So far, ahead of the October town meeting, we created a visual inventory identifying the current buildings, their use, and the overall physical condition, which helped us visualize where we could put community groups and where we should be prioritizing future capital improvements. We're currently working through the Winslow School Design Project to determine that feasibility, and we'll use that outcome to guide future discussions about the school and potential uses. Once again, Maytown meeting will consider a free cash article to demolish the 180 Lakeview Ave building, which we know is unusable in its current state. And the select board adopted a policy that enhanced the use of the Council on Aging after hours to address a need that it identified within the community. Things that we see as upcoming items toward this goal, working with the media department to identify what the current costs of a PEG center would be and identify next steps for the remaining $800,000 that they have that was allocated by town meeting back in 2019 for that type of a project. Begin to develop options for consideration of the future of the 120 Westford Road rec building, especially as the rec department looks to move into the new clubhouse that was recently renovated on the Sherburne Road parcel, Sherburne Ave. And then once the DPW is formally established, we've already begun conversations about establishing a true facilities division and developing a town-wide maintenance schedule as opposed to what we've been doing, which is very isolated. And in the next item, we talk about how we've already started that with public safety as well.
Questions on that goal?
Nope, excellent work.
I'm getting there.
Fantastic. Goal B, develop a 5-year plan for staffing, services, equipment, and infrastructure for each department with a specific focus on the Department of Public Works, the police, and fire departments. In February, we awarded a contract to LaValle Brensinger Architects to conduct a thorough facilities assessment of both our police and fire departments, the Central Station for Fire, to identify a 5-year capital plan, the space needs, and determine overall condition to help guide future discussions. One of the other things we've asked them to do is to look at the existing fire parcel to see if down the road it's possible to simply build an addition on that site. Our fire chief has been working hard, and we've had multiple conversations identifying their current staffing approach. Tyngsborough has a very unique staffing approach. We rely heavily on a combination of full-time and part-time firefighters, which works very, very well. It's a challenge for them scheduling, but it works well for our community. They're also looking at analyzing the right path for future staffing. We saw that he's projected in the future they'll need a full-time fire inspector, and that's all been a very collaborative process. I know that him and Assistant Chief Sands are also looking at standard operating procedures, comparing it to what they've been doing, neighboring communities, and then also looking at their department structure. Upcoming items, we'll work with the report that we get from LaValle Brensinger to present a comprehensive assessment to this board, and we plan to use that to talk about long-term planning for those buildings. We know that the town wasn't in a position to afford a new public safety building when that committee finished its work, but we also know that this board prioritized figuring out, well, what do we do now and where do we move forward? We'll continue to work with Chief Russell on the strategic planning that his department has been doing, and we'll start talking to the police department about their plans for future growth and staffing. This is something that they look at pretty regularly, especially with a lens on accreditation, but we'll take a more proactive approach on our end as well. And for the DPW, we need that to pass the House first. We'll appoint a superintendent, and then we'll start looking at formalizing their standard operating procedures. One of the things that this board knows is that we added language in the union contract that would allow us to do that without impact bargaining, really setting us up to develop something that even, every single employee of the highway department is excited about as well.
Questions on that? When do we expect anything from LaValle Brensinger?
Relatively quickly. They've just this week received the physical assessments that they needed from the chiefs. We have a second meeting set up with them 2 weeks out to talk about that, and I expect that we'll have a final plan from them sometime early to mid-May.
Excellent, thank you.
All right, the next one is to improve communication with residents, provide clear understanding of how their taxes are calculated and assessed, provide clear understanding of where revenue is generated and tax money is spent with a specific focus on schools, public safety, and roads. And of course, Mr. Eldridge helped push this one along. To that end, we're hosting 3 budget office hours with the goal of making the budget process easier to understand and more accessible to residents. And of course, the budget presentation took a deeper dive into the categories of expenditures, staffing, the breakdown of revenue, and we're working on a better presentation of the budget than just the spreadsheet that residents are typically used to seeing. And so that's the first upcoming item, is developing. It won't be a budget book that you'd see in like a Lexington for the first year, but I didn't mean to pick on Lexington. But certainly it'll help the average resident understand, here are all these numbers, what does it mean for each individual department?
Yeah, relative to that, and I think Ed Smith talked about it, and people say, oh, my tax bill went up, and there was multiple folks who asked me about, oh, gee, my taxes went way up, And some of it was confusion because we went to a new system and the presentation of your tax bill is different. And so there was some confusion, and I think we have an opportunity there to not just give, I think what we could do is perhaps work with the Board of Assessors to just help people understand how their tax bill comes about.
Absolutely.
And like I said, I'll show them my tax bill and walk through and say, this is how it comes about, this is where it happens. There is a change that happens partway through the year, because we're estimating that this is what it's gonna be, and then we get the final things. So I think people just need to understand some of those things that happen.
Absolutely. Another upcoming item is that, we've already started talking to the IT department about how we can leverage the existing website and softwares that we have to provide a more comprehensive, real-time look at the town's budget. There are very expensive softwares out there. OpenGov has one that I think Littleton uses, and you can get into some really big detail. So we have a lot of technology at our disposal. We're looking at what the best way is, and it may be something where we're slowly ramping up to something like a Littleton, but I think we can do a much better job about more timely reporting on the town website.
Definitely ramp up. Crawl, walk,
Yep.
run.
Absolutely.
If we just try to throw everything in there, that's probably not the best way. I think we can make incremental changes that I think people will gravitate to, and they'll provide us feedback, and that way we don't go overboard, right? Because you can go and spend a lot of stuff.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The next one is to improve operational efficiencies in departments and effectively account for costs and non-tax revenues, identify and explore new or alternative revenue sources to support capital and ongoing programming and services. The town manager and the finance director, along with our HR director, coordinated the use of a consultant to really dive into the operations of our treasurer and collector's office to identify areas for improvement, both in terms of efficiencies but also best practices. We've completed the fact-finding portion of that project, and in fact, just today received a list of recommendations that we can begin to implement. A lot of it is helping people understand their roles, helping eliminate silos that had existed so that we could operate a little bit more efficiently. And of course, this will address some of the challenges that we saw ourselves facing in previous fiscal years as well. Upcoming items, one of the things that we did as a part of the Collins Center was it wasn't just a salary survey. We had a study done on what the job descriptions were. So they took all the old job descriptions, which we've been very bad historically about updating. They got input from employees, input from department heads. And now what we've discussed with the unions is administration providing input, sitting down with departments, department heads, and the staff in their offices to make sure that people aren't duplicating efforts, to make sure that all of our bases are being covered, and using that as a stepping stone to really create efficiencies in departments that, in the busyness of getting out tax bills, doing all the things that we do, we don't really stop often to figure out, is there a better way to do this? And I think we're at a perfect opportunity to do that. Both unions have expressed a willingness to do that. Obviously, when you change job descriptions, there's impact bargaining that has to be done. But we're fortunate that these job descriptions were created by the employees, so the impact is very minimal so long as we agree with the scope. Additionally, we've talked to some of our neighboring communities, and we talked a little bit about this today with the regional managers group, about looking at our current revenue to make sure that we're maximizing the revenues that we currently receive. We know, and we hear it all the time, we heard about it tonight, residents are seeing costs increase everywhere, and so we're looking at, are there ways for us to maximize the revenue we're already receiving so that we're not increasing the burden on taxpayers? On item number 5, I don't have a current update except that, some very clear upcoming items are to develop a strategy for the potential appointment of an economic development advisory subcommittee, which could be made up however this board chooses. It could be members of the planning board and the select board to really determine whether or not it makes sense to formally establish an EDC in Tyngsborough or some sort of a business association. And then to conduct outreach to local businesses to make sure that we're offering an economic development environment that works for all sizes of businesses. Obviously, the quick revenue source is a large warehouse development, but we also want to make sure that we're continuing to create an environment that our existing businesses, both small and large, are able to sustain. Item 6, I've said complete because we did launch the new website, but as anyone that spends any time on the website knows, it's a work in progress. I've been very proud. Many of our department heads have taken a lot of time to revamp their pages prior to the new launch. I think a lot of our pages were very, very stale, and that's changed quite a bit. So we're all learning the new software. I think it's a lot easier for residents to navigate. That's the feedback that we've received, and now it's a matter of us making sure that we're using it as frequently as we should. Plan for affordable housing, including approach for addressing the MBTA adjacent communities legislation, reviewing and updating the 2020 to 2024 housing production plan. The town planner and the zoning review committee have worked diligently with NIMCOG to put together draft zoning, which town meeting will consider to comply with the MBTA Communities Act. We were awarded this year a $30,000 DLTA grant with NIMCOG, which will have NIMCOG helping us update our housing production plan, which will also help us maintain our housing choice designation, which has been a very lucrative grant program for us. And finally, I think we're starting to think creatively about maintaining the affordable units that we have, and that's reflective in this board's support for it, and then ultimately CPC authorizing funding to potentially preserve a unit that's being foreclosed on. And just an upcoming item is working with NIMCOG to start the process of updating our housing production plan, which will certainly involve multiple meetings that get input from the select board, the planning board, our affordable housing trust, and the community as well. On item number 8, monitor plans for extension of the commuter rail from Lowell to Nashua and explore ways to leverage the proposed expansion to benefit Tyngsborough. That project had largely died in New Hampshire for a while. However, 2 weeks ago, Congresswoman Trahan's office called and said that, her name has escaped me, but one of the congresswomen in New Hampshire had gotten together a delegation of representatives from New Hampshire, and they were looking to revive the project. And she wanted to first say, do you have any immediate harsh opposition to this? And I said, no, I think as long as we're part of the process, it makes sense. So I haven't heard any updates since. I know that they were putting together a group that was going to work on the local side. I think there was some concern in Nashua about the project, and so I think the next phase is the federal delegation working with local communities in New Hampshire to explain the benefits. And then once they have the buy-in, that's where I think we would have a seat at the table in determining what makes the most sense. And certainly with the, Nashua permitting a casino there, eliminating vehicular traffic by extending the Lowell line into Nashua with potentially a stop at the Pheasant Lane Mall would make a lot of sense for everybody. Defining the Department of Public Works roles and responsibilities. We are told that the bill will pass shortly, and I'm optimistic that that's the case. In the meantime, as I've mentioned before, we've developed a DPW implementation working group, which has talked about ensuring a smooth transition. I think the way that the board crafted the home rule petition made it so that it will automatically be a seamless transition, but we want to also make sure that we're maximizing the efficiencies that this type of opportunity brings us. So the group has met a few times now. We've agreed on an org chart, which just matches really what the DPW Act outlined. We've created a job description for the new Superintendent of Public Works position, and as soon as that act is passed, we'll engage in a conversation with the board about how we plan to move forward with filling the position. Certainly, once that position is filled, would be the time for us to start looking at really delineating the roles below the superintendent, ensuring that we have standard operating procedures that maximize the cooperation between all of the divisions that will become under that leadership. And then, long-term, developing a 5-year plan for ramping up the Department of Public Works budget so that we can start to accomplish some of the bigger things that we'll be able to with a bigger department. All right, I swear we're getting to the end. Item 10, assess feasibility and funding options for solar panel installation and other energy-saving measures at Town Hall, the new DPW garage, and additional town buildings. On the energy savings piece, Kat works closely with Guardian Energy, which is our energy consultant, on developing applications for the Green Communities program. I believe we're currently looking at one that will recommission all of the automated HVAC systems we have. Over time, they fall out of balance, and so that results in us using more energy than we need to. At the same time, I had a really productive meeting last week with Invalion Technologies, which is the largest municipal solar company, to develop a plan for an RFP that essentially would create a new revenue stream for us. We would lease our roof here at Town Hall. Another option is the Council on Aging. They would install the solar panels at their own expense. We aren't in a position where we currently need any additional energy credits. we are fortunate to be part of the Charles George landfill solar farm. And if we received any more credits, we would just kind of waste them. So the easiest way and a revenue source is to lease space. I think we start with this building and check out the feasibility of the Council on Aging. Another thing that they can do, and he'll look at our different parking lots to see where it's possible, is solar canopies. We always talk about how our equipment isn't parked in garages. An obvious example is the police department, though that site is kind of tight. But places like that where we can put these solar canopies, again, they build it at their expense, they maintain it, and we generate revenue by leasing the space to them. So in the next few weeks, they'll be out to all of the different parcels. Given the condition of most buildings, I think for buildings right now, we're looking at this one, the Council on Aging. The DPW building will be ready to go with solar on that pre-engineered building. The middle school project, which is through the school solar program, is ready to go as well. And we're inheriting a small solar system on the clubhouse on Sherburne Nature Center. Review options to determine if Tyngsborough should have a representative on the Draco Water District. I would note that through Mr. Eldridge, the Select Board's been working on addressing several pending challenges with the district and rebuilding a cooperative relationship. So I didn't put much in here except for to say that I think we're at a point where now we're renegotiating a new service agreement. I think there's a potential for us to address some of those issues doing that way, going through that process. Item 12 is just how we're constantly pursuing grants. We had a slide in the budget that showed that we received $3.8 million. That number, of course, has gone up since I put this presentation together. And then on item 13, develop a personnel recruitment and retention strategy. This is going to be a big focus of what we do when we look at the job description and org structure over the summer. And I think that one of the things we've done this year through the collective bargaining process is ensuring that we're remaining competitive to keep the talent that we have, because we know when we replace positions, we often have to go higher than what we're paying current staff, and also managing our budget. And I think we did a really good job with that. I think the unions that we have settled with would tell you that it was both affordable but also designed to keep the good talent that we have, because even if you have to pay a little bit more for the right talent, it will save you money down the road in mistakes, fixing mistakes, etc. That's all I've got on the updates on the goals. And we'll publish this week on the town's website. We'll do a social media post about it, because I think we've done a lot in the last year that we should highlight.
Sure. Questions, comments?
No, it's great.
I think it's great. Maybe though, can we make it not red?
Yeah.
Yeah, red looks bad. I
Yeah,
thought about that
any
afterwards.
other color.
Yes,
Like
you got it.
blue, green
We'll
and
do blue.
Whichever one
For
you
stuff that you've done, make them green and the
Yep.
other stuff blue. The
Good
only thing
idea.
I will tell you is some people are colorblind. So
That's a good point.
just. No, it's true.
No, because she works for
No,
the Commission on
it's the way
Disability.
Colin looked over, it's like, what do you think over there,
She
you know?
works for
How
the
am I gonna
Commission
do
on
that?
Disability and often points out the contrast issue. That's why I was looking at her. I was seeking her guidance. She is not colorblind, as far as I know.
So let's make sure that we address the accessibility.
She spent too much time looking at the solar eclipse.
Okay. That's it. Oh, Select Board reports. Mr. Schneider?
Just want to give a shout out to the library for hosting the eclipse viewing party today at the Sherburne property. I think it was very, very well organized. It was a great time. A lot of people showed up. So shout out to them.
Yep, it was a fun event at the
It
Sherburne
was.
property. I was there, and there was a lot of people, and I agree. It was well organized, and everybody had a lot of fun.
I was not there. I was unfortunately inside work, so that was terrible. But nothing from me this evening.
Okay. I did get to watch the eclipse. I do think I have a solution to our fiscal problems. I've come into a bunch of eclipse glasses.
Oh, interesting.
And I've seen a huge demand for them, so I think we could sell them.
I do believe as of 4:30 this afternoon, their value dropped
Oh.
dramatically for another 70 years or so.
No, I have nothing else. Just a reminder for everybody, budget presentation on Wednesday, if you want to get into the nitty-gritty, and then next Wednesday, and then the 23rd. So 10th, 17th, and 23rd. Our next meeting is the 22nd. We'll have another full meeting where we'll go through all of the warrant articles and place them and make recommendations on them. With that, I will take a motion to go into executive session.
I move that the select board enter into executive session pursuant to exemption 2 to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, all non-union positions, and pursuant to exemption 3 to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body and the chair so declares. SEIU Local 888, Mid-Managers Union, NEPBA Local 8A, NEPBA Local 8B.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Mr. Schneider?
In favor.
In favor.
In favor.
I am also in favor. That carries 4-0-0. One other thing, annual town meeting, May 7th. Be ready. It'll be lots of fun. Hope to see everybody there. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.